I woke up feeling dizzy and floaty, like I was on a cloud. I figure it was just the cold medicine I took before bed. It always makes me feel that way. But something was different. I was sitting up, and my hand was pressed against a man's bare chest. I could feel his heart pounding under my palm. I forced my eyes open, but the room was dark. In the faint moonlight, I could make out a tiny room with old, worn-out furniture and a mirror on the wall. The man beneath me, I couldn't see his face clearly, but just from the shape of his jaw and shoulders, I could tell he was incredibly handsome. I figured I had to be dreaming. I mean, I'm 30 years old, and I've never even had a boyfriend. My brain must have finally snapped and given me the wildest dream of my life. So I just went with it. Then a rooster crowed outside, and I woke up for real. A blinding flash of pain shot through my head, and suddenly a whole lifetime of memories flooded into my brain. Memories that weren't mine. I had transmigrated. I'd been transported back to 1976 into the body of a village girl who shared my name, Hua Zhao. This version of Hua Zhao had a rough life. She lost her parents young and was raised by her grandfather, who spoiled her rotten. She grew up lazy, rude, and mean. She was also dark-skinned and overweight, and basically everyone in the village couldn't stand her. By 18, not a single person had come to ask for her hand in marriage. Then one day, her grandfather's old army buddy sent his grandson to visit. The young man was tall and handsome, and grandfather and granddaughter immediately hatched a plan. Grandpa got the guy drunk, and the village Hua Zhao forced herself on him. The young man married her without complaint, but left that same day. After that, he only sent money each month and never came back. 10 months later, she gave birth to twins, and soon after, her grandfather passed away. Left alone with 2 babies, she became even more hot-tempered. One day, she picked a fight with her pretty cousin, slipped, tumbled down a hill, and died. That's when I took over her body. So my dream wasn't a dream at all. I had actually assaulted a man. If I put myself in his shoes, he probably wanted to kill me. I lay stiff as a board under the blanket, too horrified to move my massive body or turn my round, dark face toward him. Then I heard Grandpa's voice outside calling me to get up. A matchmaker, third Aunt Zhao, had come to visit. I knew from the original Hua Zhao's memories that this was all part of a trap. Grandpa and the original Hua Zhao had planned for the matchmaker to walk in and catch us together, so they could use her as a witness to force the young man to stay married. I couldn't let that happen. He'd already been violated. I wasn't going to humiliate him on top of it. So I screamed at the top of my lungs. That matchmaker who said, "I'd never find a husband? Tell her to get lost." "I don't need her help," the matchmaker stormed off, insulted. Grandpa stood in the yard, completely confused. This was not what we'd agreed on last night. I let out a breath of relief when I saw through the dirty window that the yard was empty. Then a cold breeze hit my back, and I realized I was still completely naked. And I could feel it, a burning gaze, locked onto my back, seeing right through me. I yanked the blanket off both of us and wrapped it around myself. Yishin paused for a second, then jumped up and got dressed in no time. I buried my head under the covers and refused to turn around. With the lights off, every woman looks the same, but in daylight, the gap between us would be enormous. One look at my face would probably traumatize him all over again. Grandpa started walking over, calling my name. I yelled at him not to come in. He stopped and asked nervously, "Did he bully you?" Meanwhile, Yishan was buttoning his shirt, staring at the bruises on his wrists. I could only imagine what he was thinking. Who bullied who, exactly? I was mortified. Grandpa had no self-awareness at all. His granddaughter literally forced herself on this man, and he's asking if I got bullied? "I'm not dressed yet. Don't come in," I snapped. Grandpa's voice turned cheerful. He assumed everything had gone according to plan. I needed him gone, so I yelled, "Grandpa, I want meat. Go buy some." He happily agreed and headed off to the town 10 miles away, coughing as he went. There was nowhere to buy meat in the village. Hearing his weak cough made my heart ache. I understood now why this old man had set up the whole scheme. He just wanted to make sure his granddaughter would have someone to rely on before he was gone. Once he left, I spoke up, my face still buried in the blanket. About last night. I'm really sorry. You think sorry is enough? His deep voice came from behind me. I rubbed my ears under the covers. I'm a sucker for nice voices. Always have been, and his was the most beautiful voice I'd ever heard. Rich, deep, magnetic. If last night hadn't happened, I would have done anything just to be his friend and hear him talk. You're right, sorry isn't enough, I said sincerely. Whatever you want to do, hit me, yell at me, report me, I'll accept it. It's up to you. There was a pause. Then he said, I'll take responsibility. I was stunned. I hadn't cried or threatened him the way the original Hua Zhao would have. Why was he still offering to marry me? No, 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 I said quickly. It's all my fault. You don't need to take responsibility. If you're angry, come yell at me anytime. If you're not angry, let's just pretend it never happened. Thank you. There was no way I was accepting that deal. A marriage certificate and a few dozen yuan a month while he's off in the military? Spending my whole life as a grass widow? No thanks. In my past life, I was single at 30-something by choice, not because I couldn't find anyone. And I'm not about to marry a stranger just because of one night. That's insane. Yi Shun was confused. He'd clearly figured out that Grandpa and the original Hua Zhao had set him up. He assumed the goal was marriage. But now I was turning him down? Did the grandfather-granddaughter duo really go through all that trouble just for one night? You should go, I told him. You'll miss the bus and you still need to catch a train, right? I need to get dressed and go work in the fields. I pulled the blanket down just enough to free my shoulders. He immediately looked away, turned around and walked out. I let out a huge breath and rushed to get dressed. And then I almost cried. The underwear was enormous, like something made for a sumo wrestler. How much did this body even weigh? I dug through the original Hua Zhao's memories and found the answer. Over 200 jin, that's over 220 pounds. The village scale only went up to 200, so nobody knew the exact number. I stood up and forced myself to look in the tilted mirror on the wall. The massive figure staring back at me was shocking. My features were squished together on a huge round face. My skin was dark and rough. I was wrong before. I wasn't some little fox spirit. I was a black bear. The only good thing? My eyes. Even buried in all that flesh, you could tell they were big, bright, and beautiful, with natural double lids. From the other room, I heard Yi Shun packing his things. He'd had a mission to get to. He shouldn't have even stayed for dinner last night. But Grandpa had saved his grandfather's life in the war, and he felt too grateful to refuse the hospitality. And then, well, I'm leaving now, he said through the door. I'll be back in 1 to 3 months after my mission. We'll get married. Those last words sounded like they were hard for him to say. He'd never imagined the woman he'd spent his life with would be someone like me. But he believed in doing the right thing. Married? No, that's not necessary. I pressed my face against the door to refuse. But through the crack in the door, I finally got a clear look at his face. The words died in my throat. How could anyone be this handsome? Tall and perfectly proportioned in his military uniform, with sharp brows, brilliant eyes, and the cool, untouchable presence of a snow-capped mountain. For one brief, dangerous moment, I wavered. I'm young, I thought. I can afford to take risks. Maybe sometimes it's okay to be a little reckless. After Yi Shun left, I sat down and tried to process everything. Honestly, there wasn't much to miss from my old life. My parents were already gone, and all I did was work overtime. The only thing I'd wasted was years of mortgage payments. My new body was a bigger problem. I could barely breathe just sitting still, and I was so hungry I wanted to eat raw onions from a flower pot. I decided losing weight was priority number 1 before this body killed me. The house was a disaster. 3 crumbling dirt rooms with almost no furniture, everything covered in filth. But the yard was amazing, over 2 mu of open land. In my past life, I'd spent a fortune just to get a tiny 20-square-meter garden. This felt like a countryside mansion to me. While cleaning the bedding, I noticed the blood stain and suddenly remembered something important from the original Hua Zhao's memories. She got pregnant from last night and had twins. I literally dropped to my knees in gratitude. A car accident in my old life had left me unable to ever have children. Now I was getting two at once. Then I found a small jade pendant under the bed, imperial green, incredibly valuable. It was Yi Shun's, torn off during the night. In the original timeline, the cousin Hua Zhao bought it for almost nothing, and afterward her life magically transformed. She went from poor village girl to wealthy city dweller within a year. The original Hua Zhao never connected the dots, but I did immediately. I was sure this pendant was some kind of transmigration cheat item. I tried shouting commands at it and even cut myself to do a blood bond. Nothing happened. I felt pretty stupid. But then I noticed the cut on my arm had completely vanished. I spent a while studying the jade pendant but couldn't figure out how it worked. No magical space appeared, nothing dramatic happened. But after holding it for a while, I realized I could breathe easily again. Before, just kneeling down had left me gasping for air, but now my chest felt light. The pendant seemed to improve my health. Maybe it wouldn't give me superpowers, but at least I wouldn't drop dead from obesity. I tied the broken cord back together, hung it around my neck, and got to cleaning. I threw out almost everything. The house was nothing but junk. Then I swept, wiped down the walls, and scrubbed the windows until they were clear. When Grandpa came back from his 10-mile trip to buy meat, he froze in the yard. He couldn't believe his granddaughter, who had never lifted a finger in her life, was washing clothes. He walked inside and was stunned again by how clean everything was. Then his face darkened. Where is he? When he realized Yi Shun was gone, real killing intent flashed in his eyes. This old man had survived actual battlefields. He was no joke. I felt genuine respect for him in that moment. I guided him inside, helped him onto his bed, and brought him hot water. He stared at me like I was a stranger. The original Hua Zhao had treated him like a servant, bossing him around without a shred of gratitude. So I told him straight, "Grandpa, I know I've been terrible. From today on, I'm changing completely." His eyes went red, and he quickly looked away to hide it. Then he asked about Yi Shun again. I told him the truth, that the man had left for his mission. Grandpa got upset. He started explaining why he'd set up the whole scheme. He was dying and he knew it. Once he was gone, his brother Hua Shan's family, a bunch of village bullies, would steal the house and sell me off to some man in the mountains. He needed me married before that happened. I did something terrible, but I had no choice, he said, coughing hard. Then he spat up blood. I panicked and started rubbing his back. I couldn't let him get this worked up, so I told him what he needed to hear. I was just teasing you. Yi Shun said he's coming back to marry me, 1 to 3 months, as soon as his mission ends. His eyes lit up. Really? I pulled out the jade pendant. He even left me this as a promise. Grandpa had been a bodyguard for military officers in his younger days. He recognized good jade when he saw it. He asked if I'd stolen it, and I reminded him that our family was the richest in the village. The original Hua Zhao had never needed to steal anything. That was actually her one redeeming quality. I promised him I'd learn to cook, to farm, to take care of myself. He smiled with blood still on his lips, looking relieved for the first time. He trusted the Yi family's honor and believed Yi Shun would keep his word. Then he told me to go make food, adding quietly that he wasn't hungry and I should cook less. I knew what that really meant. We were almost out of grain, and he was planning to skip meals so I'd have enough to eat until next month. I walked to the kitchen with a heavy heart. What neither of us knew was that Yi Shun hadn't actually left. He'd been standing outside the door the whole time, listening to everything. I checked what food we had left, some coarse grain, 2 wilted cabbages, and a few sprouting potatoes. That was it, and Grandpa's payday wasn't for another 5 days. Every month he'd spend his entire military pension on food, and every month he'd go hungry the last few days, so the original Hua Zhao could keep eating. She ate enough for 3 people. I knew how to cook from my old life, though the rural wood-burning stove took some getting used to. I made potato and cabbage stew with the meat Grandpa bought, using 1 pot for porridge and the other for the stew. When it was ready, I gave Grandpa the big portions and took only a small bowl for myself. He tried to swap our dishes, but I told him I was going on a diet. He'd never heard the word diet before. In 1976 rural China, being fat just meant you were lucky. I had to tell him Yi Shun said I was too heavy to have children safely. That finally convinced him. Then we started eating, and something strange happened. The food was unbelievably delicious, better than anything either of us had ever tasted, and I'd eaten at world-class restaurants in my past life. It was just plain potatoes and cabbage with salt, nothing fancy. Grandpa was amazed too, so it wasn't just the ingredients. Even stranger, my tiny portion left me completely satisfied and full of energy, even though the original Hua Zhao used to eat entire basins of food at once. And Grandpa, who suffered from severe stomach pain that kept him awake most nights, finished his meal, said he felt wonderful, and fell into a deep sleep on his bed, something he almost never managed. I was pretty sure now that the jade pendant was behind all of this. It healed my cut, helped me breathe, and apparently made my cooking magical. Grandpa had terminal stomach cancer that doctors had given up on. Maybe, just maybe, my cooking could help him too. After cleaning up and finishing the laundry, I decided to explore. I headed toward the mountain behind our house, and the moment I stepped in, I felt something was different. I spent the afternoon in the mountain behind our house experimenting with a jade pendant. I discovered it could absorb energy from surrounding plants, purify it, and send some into my body while returning an improved version back to the plants. It was a two-way exchange. The plants grew stronger, produced more energy, and the cycle kept building. I could control it too, focusing on one plant at a time. When I tried it on a small bitter herb, the thing shot up a foot tall in seconds, smacked me in the face, dropped all its seeds, and withered. So the pendant could massively speed up a plant's entire life cycle, but it couldn't cheat death. Everything still followed nature's rules eventually. That meant no immortality, which honestly relieved me. But when I thought about what fast-growing crops could mean, I got excited. This was better than having a magical storage space. I could use it on real land, as much land as I could get. I tested it on blueberry saplings next. Within minutes they grew tall, fruited heavily, and the berries tasted incredible. Even better, after enough energy exchanges, I could actually communicate with the plants. The blueberry trees shook their leaves and sent feelings into my mind. More. I buried the fallen fruit to hide the evidence, then drained the trees back to their dormant winter state so they'd blend in with everything else. They felt sulky about it. There was one downside to all this energy exchange. My body kept sweating out layers of dark, foul-smelling grime. By the time I headed home, I was dripping with the stuff and reeked. Back at the house, I found two unwelcome visitors, the wives of my cousins from Uncle Hua Shan's side of the family. The older one, Big Bull's wife, immediately started mocking me loudly, claiming I'd soiled myself and threatening to tell the whole village. The younger one, Second Bull's wife, just laughed along mindlessly. I ignored them completely, went inside, and started boiling water for a bath. Grandpa woke up from his nap and came out glaring at them, which shut Big Bull's wife up pretty quickly. Grandpa confronted the two women in our yard. Big Bull's wife claimed she was just being neighborly by tilling our garden, but Grandpa saw right through it. Their family had never helped us before. They were only here because Grandpa was dying and they wanted to claim our land. I grabbed a fire poker and marched outside. I told them to leave and demanded they flatten the row they'd already dug. I knew exactly how their scheme worked. Plant seeds in our soil now, then later claim the harvest was theirs, and eventually take the whole yard. Uncle Hua Shan's family had 10 mouths to feed on a tiny plot, and our Tumu yard was the biggest in the village. Both women were surprised I'd figured it out. The old Hua Zhao was never this sharp. I waved the poker around menacingly without actually hitting them. Touching elders would give their family an excuse to retaliate, and they grudgingly stomped the dirt flat and left. Big Bull's wife shot me a threatening look on the way out. I rushed inside to bathe. After an afternoon of absorbing energy through the pendant, my body had been oozing dark, smelly grime. I spent an hour scrubbing with a towel in a small wash basin. No bathtub existed that could fit this body through the door frame. But afterward, I noticed my skin was visibly lighter. The pen was actually fixing my complexion too. Dieting I could handle on my own, but turning dark skin fair? That was pure magic. Just as I finished, a girl burst through the door screaming, "Big sister, Hua Zhao, run. My grandpa is coming with people." She was a pretty, delicate girl of 16 or 17, slim, pale, with long braids and panicked eyes. I recognized her immediately. It was Hua Zhao, my cousin. The one who, in the original timeline, would buy my jade pendant for next to nothing and watch her life magically transform. I recognized Hua Zhao's game immediately. In the original Hua Zhao's memories, Xiaoyu had always played the sweet, helpless little sister, flattering the original into giving her food and treats. But I could see through it now. She'd barged in without knocking, supposedly to warn me that her grandfather was coming with his sons. But when Grandpa spoke up from the other room, I caught her smirking before she hit it. I remembered that in the original timeline, Xiaoyu had done this repeatedly before Grandpa died, rushing over with warnings that actually just stressed him out and made his health worse. It was deliberate. So I slapped her. I held back my strength, but she still fell over and started crying. Then, right on cue, Uncle Hua Zhao arrived with his sons and grandsons, all carrying hoes. I stepped out before Grandpa could and greeted them with a smile, something they'd never seen from the original Hua Zhao. "You must be here to visit Grandpa since he's been sick," I said cheerfully. "He always said you'd come eventually. After all, everyone else in the village has already visited." People would talk if his own brother never showed up. That caught them off guard. They hadn't visited once in over a month, and the whole village knew it. Hua Zhao ignored my jab and went straight to his real plan. He ordered his sons and grandsons to start digging up our yard, framing it as helping us farm since Grandpa was too sick. It was the same trick as before, just bigger. If they planted our land, they'd claim the harvest and eventually the property. But I wasn't the old Hua Zhao. I asked loudly, in front of everyone. "Uncle Hua Zhao, since we're family, you're doing this for free, right?
No charge?
And you won't come take the vegetables later, claiming the seeds were yours?" They all froze. I'd laid out their exact plan before they could execute it. Big Bull's wife tried to change the subject by mocking my weight, saying no family could afford to feed a bride like me. I ignored her completely and kept my eyes on Hua Zhao. "So, third grandpa, will you be coming to take our vegetables or not?" Big Bull's wife tried to twist my words, saying it was normal for relatives to share vegetables. But I threw her own logic right back. Years ago, when the original Hua Zhao went to their garden to pick some vegetables, which is supposedly normal between relatives, they beat her and chased her away. "You said your family didn't have enough to share," I reminded her. "Well, same here. We don't have enough either." That shut her up completely. I looked straight at Hua Zhao and laid it out plainly. If they genuinely wanted to help, great. But if they were here to steal our land, they could leave. The whole neighborhood had come out to watch by now. Hua Zhao didn't even bother pretending. He just yelled, "Let's go," and his whole crew packed up their hoes and marched out. He was a bully who didn't care about appearances. Before they got far, I called out one last thing. "From now on, don't come to our house. My grandpa is sick and doesn't need the stress. If anything happens to him because of you, everyone will know you did it on purpose to steal our property." Hua Zhao tried to intimidate me with a hard stare, but I wasn't scared. In my past life, I'd been a criminal prosecutor, and a famous one. My cases were all violent criminals headed for the death penalty. People called me the Demon Slayer. Hua Zhao's glare was nothing compared to the killers I'd faced in court. When he tried to guilt-trip Grandpa by calling him Big Brother, for the first time ever, Grandpa fired back. 68 years, and you finally call me brother. A relative who's just waiting for me to die. I don't need that kind of family. Get out." They left. But Xiaoyu was still lurking inside, looking around the newly cleaned house with wide eyes and asking about that handsome big brother who visited yesterday. I could see from her blushing face she was already interested in Yishen. I told her the same rule applied to her. Never set foot in our yard again. To make my point, I snapped a thick wooden stick in half with just my fingers. She knew my strength firsthand and didn't argue. She left thinking I'd cool down and forgive her like the old Hua Zhao always did.
She was wrong about that.
After everyone left, I made dinner, same magical potato and cabbage stew, and then happily started working on the garden with my hoe. The whole reason I'd fought so hard to keep others off our land was because I wanted to grow things myself. With the pendant's power, anything I grew would taste amazing and have special health benefits. I wasn't sharing a single onion with Hua Shan's family. Grandpa was in such good spirits after the meal that he insisted on helping me dig, and got grumpy when I told him to rest. Meanwhile, back at their house, Hua Shan's family was scheming. They'd been trying to marry me off to mentally disabled men in the mountains, but even the families of those men rejected me after hearing what I looked like and how much I ate. The cleverest one among them was Third Bull's wife, Jiang Qin, who worked as the village accountant. She came up with a nastier plan. Instead of finding an obvious fool, which Grandpa would never agree to and might fight back against, she suggested a man from her hometown. He was 28, looked decent, wasn't disabled, and had no obvious problems on the surface. But his first wife had died under suspicious circumstances, and he was known to beat women. His mother was famously cruel, too. The real scheme was even worse. They'd take me for free, fix me up, and if I didn't work out as a wife, they'd sell me to someone else for a profit. Hua Shan approved the plan. He ordered them to make it look like the man's family found me on their own through a matchmaker, with no connection to Hua Shan whatsoever. He wanted it done fast, the proposal within 2 days, the marriage within a month. His real deadline had nothing to do with my well-being. He just wanted me gone before summer, so he could plant green beans in our Tumu yard. The next morning I headed up the mountain again. I needed to absorb more energy to improve my health, but I also needed food. Eating magical potatoes and cabbage every day wasn't enough nutrition for Grandpa's illness or my growing babies. On my way out, I ran into a villager carrying a piglet. The moment he saw me, he clutched the pig tighter and started running. I had to yell that I wasn't going to steal it, I just wanted to know where he bought it. He calmed down and told me. He also looked shocked when I said, "Thank you," since apparently the old Hua Zhao never said anything polite to anyone. I needed money. A rural household needs animals, chickens for eggs, pigs to sell. Piglets cost over 10 yuan each, and chicks cost about 2 mao apiece. We barely had any money left, and I refused to keep living off Grandpa's pension. I wanted to earn my own way. I love starting from nothing and building something up. I hiked deep into the mountains to a hot spring area where plants grew earlier in the season. Using the pendant, I sped up the growth of wild vegetables, bitter greens and elm seeds, and filled half a basket. Then I found a hidden spot, planted a sweet potato, and used the pendant to rapidly grow it through its whole life cycle. One potato became a pile of over 10 big ones. I did the same with a pumpkin seed and got 5 huge pumpkins. I filled both baskets, covered everything with grass to hide it, cleaned the dark grime off my body at the hot spring, changed clothes, and headed home. When I reached the village carrying 2 heavy baskets on a shoulder pole, everyone stared in disbelief. The village team leader asked what I'd been doing, and I told him I was gathering pig feed since we were planning to raise a piglet. People's jaws practically hit the ground. The girl who was too lazy to pick up a knocked-over bottle had hiked all day to the distant hot springs and hauled back 2 full loads. She was cooking for her grandfather. She said please and thank you. I stopped by Old Lou's house on the way and asked him to save me a good piglet. He stammered out a yes, looking like he'd seen a ghost. When I got home, Grandpa was waiting by the fence. He was more shocked than anyone to see me carrying 2 full baskets. He knew better than anyone how lazy the old me had been. I told him the sweet potatoes and pumpkins came from the hot spring area, where the warmth made things grow early. He bought it without question. That night, I made a whole pumpkin feast, stewed, fried, steamed, and pan-fried pumpkin cakes. The pendant did all the real work, making everything taste incredible. I asked Grandpa about buying a piglet. He said we could pay 2 yuan now and the rest after payday. In the village, people trusted each other enough to run tabs. That reminded me I wasn't in the modern world anymore. No online payments, no exact change required. Then I told him I wanted to make money. He got excited and offered to find me a factory job, but I said no. Wages were too low, and I didn't want to leave him alone. When I said I wanted to sell things, he nearly jumped off the bed in panic. Private buying and selling was considered capitalism in 1976. People could get arrested for it. I calmed him down and explained I'd only sell small amounts of homegrown produce, which was technically allowed. My plan was to grow bean sprouts and sell them in the county town. I told Grandpa I'd learned how by watching my mother do it when I was little. That silenced him. The original Hua Zhao's mother, Zhang Guilin, was a sore subject. Her father died when she was 5, and at 6 her mother remarried into a family 100 miles away that wouldn't accept children. Little Hua Zhao was dumped with Uncle Hua Shan's family, where she spent a miserable year being treated like a servant, skinny, small, and scared. Then Grandpa came back and took her in. With someone finally loving her, the original Hua Zhao's weight, temper, and confidence all exploded at once. Her mother sent people to check on her the first couple of years, then disappeared completely. She was apparently living in the provincial capital now. Grandpa didn't ask any more questions. He grabbed a pumpkin and headed out immediately to trade with neighbors for green beans. I followed with the rest of my harvest, going house to house swapping pumpkins and sweet potatoes for beans. Growing bean sprouts was something I actually knew how to do. In my old life, hands-on projects like this were my favorite hobby outside of work. Grandpa and I went door to door through the village, trading our pumpkins and sweet potatoes for green beans. We skipped Hua Shan's house but visited everyone else, collecting 50 jin of beans total. We didn't have enough produce to cover it all, so Grandpa promised to pay the difference on payday. Nobody minded, he was good for it. After we left, the whole village gossiped about us. Nobody believed I could actually grow bean sprouts. It was a skill nobody in the village had. Some figured we were just out of food and too embarrassed to ask for help. But a few people noticed I seemed different, smiling, polite, actually working. They started feeling a little sorry for me. No parents, a dying grandfather, and terrible relatives. Back home, I soaked the beans in warm water. The process takes about 7 days. Soak them, let them sprout, put them in baskets lined with screen mesh, wrapped in plastic and covered with a quilt for darkness and warmth. 7 jin of beans makes about 90 jin of sprouts. With my pendant's power, I was sure mine would turn out better than anyone's. No chemicals needed. I asked Grandpa to teach me basket weaving, so we'd have enough containers.
He was thrilled to teach me something.
But when we finished our first basket side by side, his eyes went wide. Mine looked like it was made by a professional. In my past life, I was obsessed with handicrafts. Weaving, knitting, embroidery. It was how I relaxed. I'd accidentally shown too much skill, but Grandpa just beamed with pride. The next morning we went to Old Lou's place for a piglet. I'd planned to buy one, but Grandpa explained that you need at least 2. One goes to the government as a quota pig, and only then can you keep the second for yourself. I ended up buying all 4 piglets. With the pendant, feeding them wouldn't be a problem, and extras could be sold for cash. We also picked up 10 chicks, 10 ducklings, and 10 goslings from neighbors on the way home. The village thought we were crazy. Who could afford to feed all that? But they didn't know about my secret advantage. I didn't lack food. I lacked meat and money. When we got home, 3 strangers were standing outside our fence. A young man and 2 older women I'd never seen before. When we got home, 3 strangers were waiting. A young man, a matchmaker wearing clean gloves, and a scrawny old woman who turned out to be his mother. They looked me up and down with obvious disgust, then quickly looked away like I hurt their eyes. But the old woman's gaze snapped right to the piglets on my back and the baskets of chicks in my hands, and her eyes lit up with interest. Grandpa sized up the man too, nearly 30, unmarried. 3 days ago he might have considered him, but after meeting Yishen, nobody measured up. His obvious disdain annoyed the visitors. Inside, the old woman scanned our house, noticing it was bare but surprisingly clean, not matching what she'd been told about us at all. I served them water and acted polite but quiet, like a normal shy farm girl. That didn't match their information either. But I could read people. I'd been on 99 blind dates in my past life. One look at this man, cold eyes, tight expression, a hint of violence underneath, and I knew he was bad news. The matchmaker launched into her pitch, calling him the finest man in their village and saying I might, barely, be good enough for him. His first wife had apparently died. They blamed it on her weak fortune. I shut it down immediately. Don't bother. I'm unlucky too. No parents, no fortune. I'm definitely not worthy of such an amazing man. Sorry you wasted the trip. I stood up to show them out. The old woman, whose surname was Yao, earning her the village nickname, Old Witch, for her nasty temper, almost started cursing at me. But then she heard my 4 piglets squealing in the backyard and caught herself. Those piglets meant food. Money. She switched tactics fast, suddenly sweet-talking about how my strong build was a sign of good fortune. Then she asked Grandpa the real question, "Is it true you get 50 yuan a month?" Grandpa confirmed it. That was the moment the old woman's eyes went bright with greed. 50 yuan a month was more than her family had saved in decades. In her mind, I was a golden goose. She didn't care what I looked like, she wanted Grandpa's pension. She got aggressive, proposing that we settle everything over lunch, and I go home with them that very afternoon. She promised they'd treat me well. What she was really thinking was obvious. Keep me around as long as Grandpa's money kept flowing, and if that dried up, they could always fix me up and sell me off later. Grandpa told the visitors I was already engaged. The old woman didn't believe him and kept pushing, but we both stood firm. She left reluctantly, drooling over the smell of the meat I'd started cooking, muttering that she'd make me her daughter-in-law no matter what. Her son Wang Xiong glanced back at our house and said he'd return tomorrow. He was the type who believed any woman could be handled. If charm didn't work, he'd use his fists. He knew exactly where to hit, so it hurt without leaving visible marks. I didn't give them a second thought. After lunch, I headed back to the mountains with my baskets. The piglets needed food, and we barely had enough grain for Grandpa and me. Something had changed in the village, though. People were actually being friendly to me. The pumpkins and sweet potatoes I'd traded yesterday had been a huge hit. One woman stopped me on the road and asked if I found more. She'd trade any grain I wanted. That was perfect since we needed variety in our diet. I was happy to be generous with neighbors. It made the village more pleasant, and I was thinking long-term. My children would grow up here. If their mother was hated by everyone, they'd be bullied. At the hot springs, I found that village kids had already picked the area clean of wild vegetables. No problem. I went deeper into the woods, found a hidden young chestnut tree, used the pendant to cycle it through a full season, and collected 2 baskets of fresh chestnuts. Chestnuts are rich in folic acid, which is exactly what I needed. Twin pregnancies are prone to early delivery, and the original Hua Zhao's babies had been premature. I got home after dark. Grandpa was standing at the gate waiting for me, as always. Seeing him there made all my uncertainty melt away. When he asked where I got so many fresh chestnuts, I told him I'd found a squirrel's stash in a tree hollow. The squirrel must have been eaten by something. He laughed and said his granddaughter had the best luck. That evening I steamed some chestnuts and took a big bowl to a neighbor's house, trading them for millet. In this mountain area, chestnuts were common and not worth much. Everyone could gather them in autumn. But mine tasted extraordinary thanks to the pendant, so people were happy to trade. Grandpa watched me come and go, amazed at how social and strategic I'd become. He figured Yishan must have been what changed me. Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away, Yishan was on his mission. He picked up a phone and called his uncle, a political commissar in the military. "I want to file a marriage report," he said. His uncle was stunned. Yishan was the most eligible bachelor around, handsome, from a good family, with a line of women competing for him. 2 powerful families had been fighting over him for years, and their daughters had even gotten into physical fights over him. "Who is it?" his uncle asked excitedly. Yishan told him my name and address. His uncle was confused. He'd never heard of me. Yishan explained he didn't want to marry into those powerful families. He thought they were headed for trouble and didn't want to be tied to them. Then Yishan admitted, quietly, that something had happened between us that night after he'd been drinking. His uncle teased him but understood the urgency. If I was pregnant, the marriage needed to happen fast. Yishan asked his uncle to handle everything. Get the marriage certificate processed, deliver it to me personally, and throw a wedding banquet for the whole village, so Hua Shan's family would know I was protected. He also asked him to keep it secret from his parents for now. They'd expected their son to marry someone important, and finding out he'd chosen a rural girl would cause an explosion. His uncle agreed completely. He believed a man should build his career on his own merits, not through marriage connections. That same night, He made several calls, and someone boarded a train heading deep into the mountains toward my village. Back home, I fed my piglets and chicks some of the magical chestnuts. Grandpa winced at wasting food on animals, but I promised we'd buy proper feed once the bean sprout money started coming in. What I didn't tell him was that feeding them pendant-enhanced food was the whole point. It would make their meat and eggs extraordinary. The next morning my bean sprouts were already showing tiny shoots, right on schedule. I transferred them to baskets and Grandpa went off to weave more. I headed into the mountain behind our house for my daily energy exchange. This time I tried something new, breeding custom peppers. I grew a batch, asked the plants which fruit was least spicy, saved that seed, grew another generation, and repeated. After 20 rounds of selection, I had the perfect pepper, crunchy, fragrant, zero burn. Pure flavor without the pain. Then I did the opposite. I asked which pepper was the spiciest, and ran 50 generations. The result was terrifying. Just being near it made me cough, and when I crushed one in my hand, my skin swelled up instantly. I ground them into powder and wrapped it up. Basically homemade pepper spray. Maybe overkill, but I wasn't going to throw it away. When I got home carrying firewood, Wang Jiong was in my yard with a hoe, helping with our garden. Same trick as Hua Shan's family. Work the land, then claim it. I told him to leave. He refused, acting all noble about wanting to help. But I could read him perfectly. He figured once I married into his family, he'd beat the stubbornness out of me and take Grandpa's pension money. I grabbed the hoe and started swinging it at the ground near his feet, chasing him out of the yard. Then I smashed our old wooden gate to pieces to make my point. A splinter cut his face. He wiped the blood, gave me a long, cold stare, and left. Grandpa warned me he was a dangerous man. I agreed, but told Grandpa there was no point in avoiding trouble when trouble was determined to find us. We either deal with whatever comes or we strike first. Either way, just do it. Grandpa looked at me with tears in his eyes. For the first time, he saw his own toughness in me. He said even if he died tomorrow and I never married Yishen, he could finally rest easy. I didn't have time for sentimentality. I grabbed the hoe and planted every inch of our garden so nobody else could use, helping, as an excuse to set foot on our land. Neither of us knew that at that very moment, someone was heading to our village specifically for us. While I was busy planting our garden and private plots, 2 military officers had come to the village to do a political background check on me, standard procedure for anyone marrying into the military. They'd gone to the village leader Zhao Liangkai first. He'd said only good things about me. That one time I'd called him uncle had paid off. He took the officers around to other families too. The neighbor I'd traded chestnuts with praised me like I was a saint, and old Lu, whose piglets I'd bought, had nothing bad to say either. Even families whose kids the original Hua Zhao had beaten kept quiet under Zhao Liangcai's stern look. The officers left satisfied, and the village exploded with gossip. Everyone remembered that impossibly handsome soldier who'd visited a few days ago. Nobody could figure out how someone like me had landed someone like him. Most people assumed Grandpa had called in a life debt from the war, and the Yi family sacrificed a grandson out of obligation. But nobody told us any of this. They figured I already knew about my own marriage. And our only relatives in the village, Hua Shan's family, were too furious to come congratulate us. Hua Xiuyu was apparently crying while working in the fields, wishing she'd been Grandpa's granddaughter instead. I spent 2 days planting everything: vegetables in the yard, corn and soybeans, and potatoes in our private plots. I was completely in the dark about what was happening. Then Zhao Liangcai came sprinting toward me in the field, shouting for me to come home. My heart dropped. I thought something had happened to Grandpa. I threw down my hoe and started running. Then I heard the rest of his words. "You're getting married today. Your grandpa wants you home to prepare the wedding." My legs buckled, and I nearly threw out my back. I came home in a daze to find Grandpa beaming in the yard, surrounded by county officials. They'd brought mountains of gifts: bags of rice and flour, candy, cigarettes, sunflower seeds, 2 cases of liquor, and half a whole pig. It was all from Yishen's uncle, the political commissar, as a wedding present. Then Grandpa handed me a red booklet, a marriage certificate. I was speechless. Apparently, in 1976, you could get married without even being there. The certificate had no photos yet. We'd add those later. The groom didn't even need to attend his own wedding. I didn't refuse. My initial rejection of Yi Shun had been impulsive. I hadn't known I was pregnant yet. Now, holding that certificate, I felt an enormous wave of relief. In 1970s China, children without a known father would be mercilessly bullied. My twins needed this. Yi Shun had kept his word, and for that I was deeply grateful. I tucked the certificate away safely and decided right then that I'd treat this man well, for our children's sake, at the very least. Grandpa announced we'd throw a feast for the entire village. Big Bull's wife showed up and made a snide comment, warning everyone that I probably wouldn't share the food. In the past, the original Hua Zhao had guarded every scrap of meat like a dragon guarding gold. I stepped outside, smiled at her, and said, "You're right. Nothing in my house moves without my say-so." Everyone tensed up. Then I grinned at the crowd. And today I say everyone eats and drinks their fill. I butchered the entire half-pig myself and started cooking braised pork, steamed dishes, stewed meat with sauerkraut. 7 or 8 different dishes, all done by me alone, faster and better than the village women could manage together. The smell drew everyone in like a spell. When people tasted the food, some of the old folks actually regretted not snatching me up as a daughter-in-law. In the countryside, nobody cared about looks. They wanted a wife who could work hard and cook well. And I'd just proven I could do both better than anyone in the village. Big Bull's wife couldn't crack a smile the whole time. She'd been planning to claim some of that meat for her family. Now it was all in people's stomachs, and her scheming had come to nothing. The wedding feast was a huge success. Every guest went home with a bowl of leftovers, and I made sure the neighbor who'd lent us sauerkraut got an extra generous portion of meat. When people teased me about being generous for once, I joked that I couldn't afford to eat more. My husband would lose interest if I got any fatter. Grandpa and I had carefully set up our story. Yi Shun had come specifically to marry me. We'd been engaged since childhood because Grandpa saved his grandfather's life, and the wedding night had already happened on the day he arrived. I even shyly asked the village aunties some embarrassing questions about what was normal afterward, which sealed the timeline perfectly. My future babies would have a clear, respectable origin story. The villagers believed everything except the part about Yi Shun leaving for a mission. They were pretty sure he'd taken one look at me and bolted. But they respected that he'd gone through with the marriage and sent such generous gifts. What a responsible man. Hua Shan's whole clan had shown up uninvited and taken 2 of the 5 tables. Afterward, they just sat there, so I put their kids to work cleaning up. Only Hua Yi, Hua Shan's youngest daughter, a quiet girl who was basically the family's invisible servant, actually helped without complaint. Yi Shun's uncle had arranged a proper bride price: fabric, quilts, wash basins, thermoses, toiletries, all in pairs. The big items, a sewing machine, bicycle, watch, and radio, the famous 3 spinning, 1 singing, that every bride dreamed of, were coming in a few days from the provincial capital. Xiuyu couldn't contain herself around one piece in particular, a gorgeous red fabric with gold embroidery that glittered in the sunlight. She dragged me inside to look at the gifts together, though her real interest was obvious. Hua Shan's daughters-in-law lingered too, eyeing everything and already scheming about how to claim some for their own family's upcoming weddings. When Xiuyu reached for the red fabric, I grabbed her hand and stopped her. I told her to look with her eyes, not her fingers. I picked up the fabric myself to check if there was enough for matching outfits, 1 for me and 2 tiny ones for my future babies. As I shook it out, a shower of money fell from inside the folds and scattered across the floor. Hua Shan's entire family stood there frozen, staring at the cash with wide eyes. Money rained out of that red fabric, 200 crisp 10 yuan bills, 2,000 yuan total, with a note that said, "Bride price." Hua Shan's daughters-in-law lunged for it, but I blocked them and shoved them out of the room. Nobody dared challenge my strength. I gathered every bill, stuffed it in my pocket, and couldn't help grinning. In the original timeline, Yi Shun had only sent 200 yuan by telegram. This time it was 10 times more, plus all those gifts. I blushed wondering why, then told myself it was probably because I hadn't threatened or pressured him. He appreciated that. The women immediately started begging for scraps of my gifts: soap, towels, fabric, anything. I chased them all out with a broom. I was exhausted. I'd single-handedly cooked a wedding feast for the whole village while pregnant, and now I had to fight off vultures. Big Bull's wife made sure to announce the 2,000 yuan at the top of her lungs so the whole village would hear, hoping it would attract trouble. Grandpa played it cool, saying the money was nothing. He'd spent nearly 10,000 yuan on my appetite over the years, and 2,000 would barely last me 2 months. His message was clear: don't bother scheming for it, because it'll be eaten up before you can blink. Hua Shan's family was furious, but tried a different approach. Hua Shan casually mentioned he'd gotten his youngest son a prestigious job at the town's supply cooperative, 20 miles away. Could he maybe borrow the bicycle for my bride price until his son could afford his own? Of course, he never planned to return it. In his mind, the bicycle, the money, the house, the yard, everything would be his eventually. He just knew better than to say it out loud. A truly ruthless person keeps their plans silent. What none of them knew was that the 2,000 yuan was nearly all of Yishen's savings. He'd sent so much because he wanted Grandpa, his own grandfather's savior, to eat well and be comfortable in his final days. And because he'd seen that I didn't even own a decent set of clothes or a proper quilt. Hua Shan tried to borrow the bicycle from my bride price for his youngest son's new job. Grandpa refused flat out, reminding him that when I was starving, they wouldn't even lend us an onion. Then Second Bull's wife made a terrible mistake. She brought up the year they took care of me as a child after my mother left. The whole yard went silent. Everyone knew what really happened. My mother had left them 200 yuan, all her grain, every possession, and even her house, begging them to raise me. Instead, they fed me pig slop and made me sleep in the pig pen. When Grandpa finally came back, he found me half dead with fever. One more day, and I would have died. Grandpa told them never to come back. They left without a word. 2 days later, my first batch of bean sprouts was ready, plump, white, and beautiful, grown faster than normal thanks to the pendant. I had to be careful to control the energy flow, or they'd have burst out of the baskets overnight. Before dawn, Grandpa and I headed to the county town. I carried 100+ jin of sprouts on my back, like it was nothing. We took a 1-mile train ride and arrived at daybreak. Grandpa didn't take me to the market. He marched straight into the county's armed forces department and walked up to the man in charge. "Commander Hua, you're here." The man nearly jumped out of his chair. "Commander?" I was stunned. My grandfather had been a regiment commander? He'd never told me. Grandpa introduced me and explained casually that I'd grown too many bean sprouts and needed somewhere to sell them. The department head, Wang Meng, immediately understood. Private selling was legally tricky, but if the supply cooperative officially purchased them, everything was above board. He'd arrange it personally and even buy the sprouts himself to take home. Grandpa told him not to inflate the price, but I spoke up. "These sprouts are way better than anything on the market. They should cost more." I pulled back the cover and showed him the sprouts, fat, crisp, and glistening. Wang Meng's eyes widened. He agreed, quality like that deserved a premium. Wang Meng couldn't stop eating my sprouts. He popped one in his mouth and his eyes went wide. He kept going like he was eating snacks. Grandpa had to tell him to stop and handle business first. Wang Meng sent a soldier to carry the basket to the supply cooperative, have them officially purchase it, then immediately buy it all back. The supply co-workers gave me 15 fin per jin instead of the usual 10, a 50% markup. When the clerk tasted one sprout, he tried to grab more, but the soldier slapped his hand away. Orders were orders. Not a single sprout could go missing. Final count: 103 jin, 15 yuan, and 45 fun. My cost was about 3 yuan in green beans. That meant roughly 12 yuan profit per basket. If I sold 10 baskets a day. I asked Wang Meng what he planned to do with 100 jin of sprouts every single day. He said he'd share them around. But when I mentioned scaling up to 10 baskets daily, he nearly choked. He couldn't personally eat or pay for that much. So I suggested a better system. Just have the supply cooperative accept my sprouts regularly, then let the military compound's cafeteria and other work units taste them. Once people tried them, demand would handle itself. Wang Meng's eyes lit up. His own cafeteria alone could use 10 baskets a day. I couldn't sell through the regular vegetable shops. Those only bought from designated farming communes, and my village wasn't part of that system. But military and government cafeterias were a different channel entirely. Grandpa had been smart to bring me straight to Wang Meng. While they were talking earlier, I'd overheard something that hit me much harder than bean sprout profits. Wang Meng had been hinting about political changes coming, the weather clearing up after 10 dark years. I pretended not to understand, but I knew exactly what was ahead. This was 1976. 2 great leaders would die this year, and in October, the 10-year political movement would finally end. But something else was coming first. July 28th. The massive 7.8 magnitude earthquake. Over 200,000 lives lost. I sat quietly in the corner, my mind racing. I was here now with knowledge of the future. Could I just do nothing? The thought made me deeply uncomfortable. I spent my 15 yuan and Grandpa's entire 50 yuan paycheck at the supply cooperative. Fabric for clothes, cotton for baby blankets, bed sheets to protect the nice wedding quilts. Everything needed for 2 babies, doubled. Grandpa's smile got a little strained watching money disappear that fast, but at least this time I was buying clothes instead of food. While we were away, 2 men arrived from the provincial capital with the rest of Yishin's bride price: a bicycle, a sewing machine, a radio, and a watch. Nobody was home. That's when Xiaoyu appeared. She told the delivery men she was my closest sister and that Grandpa and I had gone to town and wouldn't be back until dark. She offered to store everything at her family's house for safekeeping. The men checked with 5 different neighbors, who all confirmed Xiaoyu's family was related to ours. Nobody mentioned that our families were basically enemies. They were too afraid of Hua Zhao to say anything negative. So the men handed everything over and left. The village women watched it happen and gossiped about how sneaky Xiaoyu was, but nobody stepped in to stop it. Meanwhile, at Hua Shan's house, Big Bull's wife played along perfectly, welcoming the delivery men and promising to keep everything safe. Hua Shan praised Xiaoyu for the first time in her entire life. She was so shocked and thrilled that her face turned red. Her own grandfather had never once spoken a kind word to her before. When Third Bull's wife Jiang Qin asked when they'd return the items, Hua Shan's answer was exactly what you'd expect from him. Whatever comes through my door is mine. We'll give it back when it breaks. When Grandpa and I got back to the village that evening, I immediately noticed something was off. The villagers' faces were strange. Some avoided eye contact. Some looked gleeful. Others seemed to want to say something but didn't dare. What happened? Did my house collapse? I shouted. Everyone froze. They hadn't expected me to read the room so quickly. I narrowed it down in a few questions. Not the house, not the garden, so it had to be Hua Shan's family again. Nobody would confirm it. They were all too scared of Hua Shan to speak up. I told them not to worry and headed home. Grandpa was impressed that I'd figured it out before anyone said a word. He'd been planning to ask the village leader, but I pointed out that would put the man in an impossible position: tell us and face Hua Shan's revenge, or stay silent and betray Grandpa's trust. I made dinner first. Grandpa had been dragging his sick body around all day for my sake, and he looked terrible. After eating, he wanted to come with me to Hua Shan's house, but he could barely keep his eyes open. I promised I wouldn't confront them, just do some scouting. I crept through the dark to the mountain behind Hua Shan's house and found a birch tree with a clear view of their property. After several rounds of energy exchange, the tree could communicate clearly with me. Plants can't understand human emotions, but they remember everything they see and hear. The tree told me everything. Xiaoyu had tricked Yishin's delivery men into bringing my bride price gifts, the bicycle, sewing machine, radio, and watch, to Hua Shan's house instead of mine. Now the bicycle and sewing machine were hidden in their firewood pile. The radio was stuffed in a wall crack, and the watch was tucked up on a roof beam. I smiled and headed home. Grandpa was still stubbornly awake, waiting. Once he saw I was safe, he finally let himself sleep. The next morning I delivered my second basket of bean sprouts to Wang Meng. His family and colleagues had gone crazy over yesterday's batch. Everyone wanted more. The moment the soldier left with my sprouts, I looked Wang Meng straight in the eye. Uncle Wang, I'm being bullied. Wang Meng was furious when I told him about the stolen bride price. He immediately called in his soldier Hua Zhao and ordered him to take 10 men back to my village with me. If Hua Shan's family wouldn't hand over the goods, they'd be brought back to the Armed Forces Department. Those 4 items were worth over 700 yuan, enough to press charges. But during our conversation, Wang Meng mentioned something that caught me completely off guard. Grandpa apparently had other children. An uncle named Hua Baogua, age 38, and an aunt named Hua Shulan, age 36. They lived in Beijing and wanted Grandpa to come live with them. I had zero memory of these people. The original Hua Zhao had never heard of them. Her father had told her he was an only child. So, where did these 2 come from? Wang Meng explained that Grandpa had remarried at 30, his commanding officer's daughter. They had 2 children together. But about 10 years ago, Grandpa had a falling out with his father-in-law over political differences. He left everything behind and returned to the countryside alone. His children sided with their mother's family and cut ties with him. Now they supposedly regretted it and wanted to reconcile. I pieced together what had really happened. Grandpa's second wife's family had been on the winning side of the political struggles, while Grandpa had taken the opposite stance. His children chose the safer path. That's why a former regiment commander was living in a crumbling dirt house in a mountain village. But I also realized something critical. The political winds were about to shift dramatically. Going back to Beijing right now would be dangerous. Grandpa's in-laws faction was about to fall. If we went back, we might get dragged down with them. Wang Meng also gave me 100 jin of green beans to expand my sprout production. His department was feeding several hundred militiamen during a training exercise, and they needed over 1,000 jin of sprouts daily. I happily took the beans, insisting on deducting their cost from future earnings. Wang Meng seemed pleasantly surprised by how sharp and fair-minded I was. Nothing like the rumors he'd heard about Grandpa's lazy, selfish granddaughter. I rode back to the village in an army truck with 10 armed militiamen. When the truck roared through the village, without stopping at the usual grain distribution spot, everyone chased after it, curious. It pulled up right in front of Hua Shan's house. The 10 young men jumped out and surrounded Hua Shan's family in their yard. Every one of them was carrying a gun. The great village bully, who thought he feared nothing, was visibly shaking. His 5 sons pressed themselves against the wall. The women screamed and scattered. I climbed down from the passenger seat. I'd refused to ride in the bumpy truck bed because of my pregnancy and strolled up with a smile. "Third Grandpa, I heard you took my things." He tried playing dumb, but I laid it out plainly. Did he really think he could keep my bride price? The moment I didn't receive it, I'd ask my husband, who'd come looking. Did he think he was a bandit? His real mistake was not knowing about Grandpa's connections. I told him straight. Wang Meng, head of the County Armed Forces Department, used to serve under my grandfather. He was furious and ready to arrest the whole family for theft. As a former lawyer, I knew exactly which approach to use with which kind of person. With Hua Shan, logic wouldn't work and reasoning would just lead to endless arguing. Only raw intimidation would get through. It worked. He ordered his grandsons to fetch everything. But even now they tried to cause damage. One grandson deliberately collapsed the firewood pile onto the bicycle and sewing machine. Another was about to, accidentally, drop the radio. I announced loudly that any damage would cost them between 50 and 200 yuan in compensation. They froze mid-sabotage. Suyu barely caught the watch as it fell from the rafters, her heart pounding. She'd been the one who tricked the delivery men, and now instead of earning praise, she was looking at a beating from her own family. Everything came back undamaged. Hua Shan had been careful enough when hiding the items that nothing got scratched. I decided not to push for compensation. No point backing a dangerous man into a corner when it wasn't life or death. I rode the army truck home in triumph, the whole village watching.
People looked at me differently now.
Hua Shan, the untouchable bully, had actually backed down. Grandpa nearly cried again when he heard what happened. His granddaughter had learned to borrow other people's power to fight her battles. I insisted on feeding the soldiers before they left. No meat, but I stir-fried 10 jin of bean sprouts and stewed a whole pumpkin. The boys ate like they'd never tasted food before. They left with my remaining 5 baskets of sprouts for Wang Meng, and I asked them to arrange a daily train delivery system so I wouldn't have to travel to the county every day. After they left, I soaked all 100 jin of green beans at once and headed up the mountain for my daily energy cleansing. I came back stinking and carrying 2 baskets of walnuts, chestnuts, pine nuts, and hazelnuts, another squirrel stash, I told Grandpa. I varied my excuses this time, so he wouldn't get suspicious. On the way home, I passed Hua Shan's house and heard Xiaoyu wailing from a beating. Served her right. I also bumped into Jiang Qin and reminded her that my mother's old house, now occupied by Third Bull's family, was supposed to be returned if they broke their promise to take care of me. She went pale and hurried away. That agreement was signed and certified by the village committee. If anyone ever challenged it, they'd lose. That evening, Grandpa suggested I write letters to Yishun to build our relationship. This gave me the perfect excuse. The original Hua Zhao was barely literate, so I eagerly asked Grandpa to teach me to read and write. What I didn't tell him was that I wasn't just planning to learn characters. I was preparing for next year's college entrance exam. The national Gaokao was coming back, and I intended to be ready. My real reason for learning to read wasn't just letters to Yishin. The national college entrance exam was coming back in late 1977. For the first few years, there'd be no restrictions on age, education, or marital status. This was my chance to change my social standing and be a better match for Yishin's family. He might not care about my background, but his relatives definitely would. Grandpa had old textbooks from his private school days. On day 1, I learned everything he taught me after just 2 or 3 repetitions. He was impressed but not suspicious. He didn't know what a normal learning speed should look like. The bean sprout business exploded. Hua Zhao came back with payment for my previous 5 baskets and 500 more jin of green beans. Apparently, some high-ranking officials had visited the military compound, tasted my sprouts at dinner, and demanded their own supply. Wang Meng had promised several leaders ongoing deliveries of hundreds of jin each. He told them the sprouts came from a local production team's operation, perfectly legal. Now Wang Meng wanted 1,000 jin of green beans processed at a time. That meant about 140 baskets per batch, roughly 2,000 yuan in revenue minus a few hundred in costs. Nearly 2,000 yuan profit in a single cycle. Grandpa did the math, sat down on the bed, and couldn't believe the numbers. I ordered 300 baskets with lids from Hua Zhao and arranged regular truck pickups, so I wouldn't have to haul everything by train myself. Hua Zhao also brought me Yishun's address. He was at a training camp, nothing secret, and could receive mail normally. Grandpa was right that relationships need nurturing, so I decided to win Yishun over through his stomach. I had Wang Meng buy me 20 jin of beef and some bean paste. I spent half a day making 2 big jars of spicy beef sauce, using the special peppers I'd bred with a pendant. All fragrance, no painful heat. The smell drifted across the entire village, and everyone ate their own bland dinner while breathing in my cooking. Nobody dared come ask for a taste, though. My old reputation for guarding food was still too fresh, and after the army truck incident, even Hua Shan's family was intimidated. Speaking of which, Hua Shan sent Xiuyu to come beg for a bowl. Xiuyu came to my fence with an empty bowl, crying about being hungry and saying her grandfather would beat her if she didn't bring something back. I wasn't fooled for a second. Her family ate better than most in the village. When she whispered about trading stolen eggs, I shouted it loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. Her face went green and she ran home, where she got beaten anyway for failing her mission. A few days later, Hua Zhao came with a truck to pick up my sprouts. Neighbors finally got curious enough to ask what was in all those baskets. I told everyone a carefully crafted story. Grandpa's old army friend needed bean sprouts, and I was just helping out as a favor. No money involved, he just gave me some green beans as thanks. Everyone bought it. They assumed the military was giving me work points through the village committee, or, at most, a few jin of beans. Nobody suspected I was earning over 1,000 yuan per batch. My operation had grown huge. Hua Zhao's crew had expanded the storage shed to 6 times its original size, and I now had 750 baskets on rotating 5-day cycles, producing 150 baskets daily. Then the village women asked me to teach them how to grow sprouts. I couldn't really refuse without looking selfish, but I also knew nobody could replicate my results without the pendant. So I invited them to watch and help. I explained every step clearly and honestly: soaking, draining, watering, keeping them dark. The women threw themselves into helping me water the sprouts. After doing a few dozen baskets each, they were exhausted and could barely lift their arms. Meanwhile, I'd casually watered several hundred baskets by myself and still looked fresh. Their opinion of me completely reversed. This was not the lazy girl from the rumors. The village women declared me the hardest working person in the entire village. The village women who'd learned from me went home and started their own bean sprouts. They came back every day to help me water my 750 baskets, not because I needed help but because they enjoyed hanging out. They said I was easy to talk to, had a nice voice, and never gossiped meanly. Within 5 days I'd made real friends, 5 aunties and 3 young wives. When their first batches came out, every single one was perfect, plump, white, and fragrant. Of course they were. I'd been secretly giving their sprouts a little energy boost every time I walked past their houses on my way to the mountain. I had to do this. If their sprouts failed using my exact method, they'd assume I'd held back some secret trick. So I quietly helped the families I liked and left the rest alone. Soon the whole village was growing sprouts. Nice families got beautiful results. Hua Zhao's entire clan? Their sprouts came out thin, stunted, and bitter. That's when I discovered something new about my power. I could drain energy from plants without giving anything back. I'd essentially turned myself into a human weed killer. Meanwhile, my beef sauce had finally traveled 1,000 miles to reach Yishen. When the delivery soldier announced he had a package from his wife, every man in the hallway came running. Yishen had 3 bunkmates, all military officers as rank, and their rule was to split everything. 2 of them snatched a jar each the moment the lids came off. The third, a man named Qin Feng who normally turned his nose up at other people's care packages, was visibly fighting the urge to grab one too. Yishen calmly placed both hands on his remaining 2 jars and told him the sharing was already done. After everyone scattered, Yishen opened the second jar, the spicy one, made with my custom-bred peppers. The fragrance of chili and beef filled the room. He smiled. For the first time in his life, someone had sent him a gift he truly loved. 1,000 miles away, Yishen opened my letter. I'd worked hard on my handwriting. The characters were ugly but perfectly even and neat. He noticed that consistency and thought it showed I was a careful, serious person. My letter was casual and warm. I asked if he liked the sauce, told him to let me know his preferences so I could send more, and signed off as your wife, little Hua Zhao, with a hand-drawn smiley face. He'd never received a letter like that before. He found it.
Gu.
Without realizing it, he started associating me with that word. My voice, my words, my personality, all cute in his mind. He even began rationalizing what happened that first night, reminding himself that I'd tried to stop the scheme and had shown genuine gratitude afterward. His 3 bunkmates, Zhao Yong, Zhuang Yuanwu, and Qin Feng, were more interested in the beef sauce. The 2 who'd grabbed jars were so impressed that they started calling Yishen Big Brother, just to stay in his good graces for future food shipments. Qin Feng, who came from a powerful family and had been trying to set Yishen up with his sister, was disturbed. He couldn't figure out who I was or how I'd gotten past the rival families competing for Yishen. Meanwhile, back home, I got some sobering news. The big bean sprout orders had dried up. The militia training ended, and the various officials who'd been buying in bulk didn't need more. Most government offices preferred buying through official channels with proper receipts, not from some village girl. But honestly, I wasn't upset. In just half a month, I'd earned over 20,000 yuan. That was a terrifying amount for 1976. I'd been getting nervous about how many people knew about the money flowing through my hands. Someone was bound to get jealous eventually. It was time to scale back and lie low. It was also time to announce my pregnancy. I accidentally Let my pregnancy slip during a chat with a village woman, pretending to suddenly feel nauseous and mentioning I'd missed my period by a month. Everyone got excited. When someone pointed out how lucky I was to get pregnant on the first try, I deadpanned. It wasn't just once. By your counting method, it was 5 or 6 times that night. Everyone nearly choked. One woman couldn't help asking what that was like. I thought about it and said honestly, exhausting. Coming from someone who could water 750 baskets of sprouts without breaking a sweat, that really got their imaginations going. Then someone noticed I'd lost weight. After a month of daily energy cleansing on the mountain, I dropped about 70 gene, roughly 77 pounds, going from over 200 down to 160. At 170 centimeters tall, I was still a bit heavy, but I finally looked like a normal person. My body had gone from pear-shaped to straight like a corn cob, sturdy, but no longer fat. Even more shocking to them was my skin. I used to be so dark they compared me to charcoal. Now, when one of the prettier women pressed her face against mine for comparison, we were the same shade. I credited it to eating bean sprouts daily, which the women happily believed since they'd noticed health improvements too. Less dizziness, more energy, fewer aches. For the first time, people actually looked at my face and realized I wasn't ugly. Big eyes, high nose, nice lips, shiny black hair. Everything had just been buried under fat and dark skin before. As for the bean sprout business, I'd quietly shut it down. The supply cooperative wanted 1,000 gene daily and growing, which would mean hundreds of yuan per day. Way too visible and dangerous in 1976. I'd already saved 20,000 yuan in half a month. With the political climate still uncertain, being a conspicuous capitalist could land me in prison. I had babies to protect. The women helped me calculate my due date, mid-January next year. I wrote Yi Shun a second letter with the good news. Just as I was about to mail it, I heard a bicycle bell at the gate. A person in a dark green uniform was standing there holding a letter. The mailman showed up at my gate with a letter from Yi Shun. I grinned like an idiot. He'd actually written back. His letter was short and direct. He loved the beef sauce, especially the spicy one. He told me not to send expensive things and to spend the money on Grandpa instead. He'd be sending me his monthly military allowance from now on. Just a few simple lines, but they made me so happy. He was handing over his paycheck without telling me how to spend it. What a good man. I sent off my second package, 4 jars of pickled radish this time. I'd grown the radishes myself with the pendant, so they tasted incredible. I couldn't keep sending meat. It would draw too much attention to him. But nobody would think twice about pickled vegetables. A few days later, my package arrived at his base. His 3 bunkmates had completely lost their dignity over my cooking. They now called him Big Brother, without hesitation, all for the privilege of getting a share. Yi Shun genuinely didn't want to give them any this time, but they guilt-tripped him into splitting 2 jars. Then he opened my letter. The first line stopped him cold. I'm pregnant. I'd written it carefully. I described my symptoms, the village auntie's confirmation, and my excitement about becoming a mother. I rambled about wanting both a boy and a girl, asked if he had a preference, worried about whether he'd love a daughter. I talked about the baby arriving in January, the coldest time in the Northeast, and how scared I was about keeping a newborn warm. I asked about names, admitted I didn't know anything about being a mother, and said the village women's advice was all contradictory. Then I ended strong. Please rest assured, sir, no matter what happens, I will protect our baby. Every word was calculated. I wanted to seem vulnerable enough to make him feel needed, brave enough to earn his respect, and involved enough to make him start caring about details. Men bond with children through worry. The more he thought about names and winter clothes and whether it was a boy or girl, the more real this baby would become to him. It worked. Yi Shun sat frozen in his chair, heart pounding. He was going to be a father. The world suddenly looked different, brighter, more meaningful. He had someone to protect now. 2 someones. He touched the little anxious face I'd drawn at the bottom of the letter. Then he picked up the phone and made a call. After reading my letter, Yi Shun called his uncle in a panic. He wanted cotton, fur coats, lambskin blankets, everything to keep me and the baby warm through the brutal northeastern winter. His uncle was amused. He'd never seen the famously cold and composed Yishin fuss over anyone like this. Yishin quietly asked for everything to be made in a size for a woman over 200 jin. His uncle assumed that meant the belly would be huge near delivery. He still hadn't seen me. Yishin also asked his aunt, who happened to be a top obstetrician, to write me a detailed guide on pregnancy and childbirth, since I had no mother to teach me. He requested food shipments too, mentioning proudly that my cooking was excellent. His uncle laughed at how talkative Yishin had suddenly become. The man who never showed emotion was transformed the moment his wife and child came up. Yishin made himself a private promise. He'd win the upcoming military competition, earn a promotion, and qualify to bring his family to live with him. His own childhood had been lonely, always waiting at the door for parents who never came. He wouldn't let his child go through the same thing. Back home, the bean sprout situation had taken an interesting turn. After I stopped selling, the supply cooperative was flooded with demand they couldn't fill. They'd even raised the price to 3 times the original, but I still refused. Wang Meng came to visit personally, partly to check on Grandpa, partly because he was desperate for sprouts himself. I told him I was pregnant and couldn't do heavy labor anymore. But I had a plan. I'd already taught the whole village how to grow sprouts, and several women were producing results almost as good as mine. I called over the village leader Zhao Yongkai and suggested our village apply to open an official bean sprout factory. The villagers would do the work, sell through the supply cooperative, and everyone would earn extra income. Wang Meng confirmed it was completely legal. Production teams were allowed to run their own small factories. Zhao Liangcai's face lit up with excitement. But I noticed that my friends Ma Annie and Sister Lu didn't look as happy as I expected. The village women who'd learned to grow sprouts wanted to sell them privately on the black market, stand by the road before dawn, sell to city people, pocket the cash. They weren't excited about my idea of an official factory because under the collective system, all earnings would be pooled into work points and split evenly at year's end. Why wait a year for pennies when you could have 15 yuan in your hand today? So I proposed a different model. Instead of one big factory, every household would be its own mini factory. Each family would grow and deliver their own sprouts and get paid based on exactly how much they contributed.
No pulino, no dilution.
Settle accounts regularly, pay out fairly. The women loved it immediately. Village leader Zhao Yongkai was nervous about doing something nobody had tried before, but I framed it perfectly. Think of it like the pig quota. We're just accepting a glorious bean sprout quota to fill the city workers' vegetable baskets. That gave both him and Wang Meng the political cover they needed. I set quality standards using Ma Auntie and Sister Lu's sprouts as the benchmark. Wang Meng brought the county supply cooperative director to inspect, and he signed a purchasing agreement on the spot. Up to 2,000 jin per day at 20 fin per jin, settled monthly. The whole village celebrated. Everyone could earn money based on their own effort. Nobody envied anyone else since the opportunity was equal. Everyone except Hua Shan's family. Their sprouts had failed every single time. They blamed Xiaoyu for sabotaging them out of spite and beat her again. They had no idea I was deliberately draining their sprouts of energy. I also quietly started letting my own success rate drop. I couldn't secretly boost everyone's sprouts forever. What happens when I eventually leave the village? Better to get people used to occasional failure now. I kept producing 1 or 2 baskets a day myself, earning about 20 yuan. Meanwhile, I spent freely on fabric for baby clothes, making everything in doubles, 1 pink, 1 blue. The village women scolded me for being wasteful, making so many tiny outfits in 2 colors. I just smiled and rubbed my belly. I was carrying twins, though I hadn't told anyone yet, not even their father. That would be my surprise for him. A huge delivery arrived, 2 giant sacks from Yishin. I felt like I was unwrapping online shopping packages from my old life. Inside were quilts and padded clothes for both me and the baby. Then a massive black fur coat, so long it reached the ground. Grandpa recognized it as something expensive and warm, essential for northeastern winters that drop to -40 degrees. Cotton alone won't cut it out here. Getting baby supplies was his duty. Getting me a fur coat? That was thoughtfulness. I blushed thinking about it. There were also bags of rare snacks and pastries that nobody in our village had ever seen. And tucked inside a small notebook were ration tickets, 200 jin of grain coupons, 50 jin of meat coupons, 20 jin of oil coupons. Grandpa was thrilled. Money alone couldn't buy food in this era. You needed tickets. The notebook itself was filled with neat handwriting, a detailed pregnancy guide covering everything I already knew from my past life. It was written by Yi Shun's aunt, Yi Fong, clearly a medical professional. No flowery greetings, just thorough, careful instructions. That told me more about her character than any pleasantries could. This was someone I could win over to my side. I was genuinely touched. My helpless pregnant wife act had worked perfectly. Yi Shun had mobilized his whole family for me. Now I needed to keep building this momentum, maybe learn about his parents and figure out how to handle them. Meanwhile, Yi Shun had written home to his grandfather about our marriage and the baby. He left out the part about being forced. Honestly, by the end of that night, the lines had gotten blurry anyway. He framed it as a noble decision. He'd seen that Grandpa was dying, felt sorry for me, and volunteered to marry me. His grandfather, Yi Jinghua, read the letter and nearly snapped his glasses. He immediately canceled that evening's dinner, which was supposed to introduce a young woman named Su Lizhen, handpicked by Yi Shun's mother as his future bride. The mother, Miaolongji, had been coaching the girl on how to impress the old man, confident she could arrange the marriage without Yi Shun's input. Instead, the old man ordered his aide to call them with the truth. Their youngest son was already married, a baby was on the way, and they should come celebrate. While I was happily unpacking baby supplies at home, Yi Shun's letter was causing an earthquake in Beijing. His grandfather, Yi Jinghua, read the news and immediately canceled the dinner his daughter-in-law had arranged, a dinner meant to introduce a carefully chosen bride candidate named Su Lizhen to the family. Instead, he told his aide to call with the truth. Yi Shun was already married with a baby on the way. Yi Shun's mother, Miaolongji, had been coaching Su Lizhen all evening, telling her the old patriarch looked scary, but was actually gentle. When the phone call came, her face turned to stone. Su Lizhen heard enough to understand, excused herself politely, then ran out crying. Yi Shun's father, Yi Mao, blamed his wife for pushing things without their son's consent. She fired back that Yi Shun should have told them. They were both right, but neither felt any better about it. At the grandfather's house, Miaolongji exploded the moment she read the letter. A village girl? The old man shut her down immediately. He himself was from the countryside. Her own parents were rural-born. And my grandfather wasn't just any farmer. Hua Zhao had been a decorated military commander who could have outranked everyone in the room if he'd stayed in service. When she worried about my grandfather's complicated family connections, his ex-wife's clan, the Qi family, was politically shaky, the old man pointed out that Grandpa had divorced that woman years ago. Her children had changed their surname. I had zero connection to them. After a few glasses of celebratory wine, the old man got tipsy and started musing aloud. I wonder how beautiful this Hua Zhao must be for our Yi Shun to fall in love at first sight and marry her the same day. Yi Shun's father nearly choked trying to shut him up before he said anything worse. Then the old man added cheerfully, and she's clearly got a strong constitution, pregnant on the first try. She'll give our family plenty of grandchildren. At that exact moment, Yi Shun's eldest brother and his wife walked through the door. The wife, Wen Jing, froze mid-step. She'd been married into the Yi family for 10 years without producing a single child. The doctors said the problem was hers. She was considered the family's great failure. Now the family was finally getting an heir, and it wasn't from her. She told herself she should be happy. But she wasn't. By mid-June, my garden was bursting. Tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, beans, some ripened weeks early, because I couldn't resist using the pendant when pregnancy cravings hit. I'd also planted strawberries, blueberries, cherries, and wild grapes that I'd secretly optimized so many times they were addictive. Grandpa couldn't stop eating them and kept wondering why the vines seemed to produce more the more he picked. I built a clay oven in the yard for drying fruit, baking bread, and roasting meat. The old sprout shed became a grape drying room. Even started making wine for Grandpa. His stomach cancer had been feeling better lately, and he'd started sneaking sips of regular alcohol, which made him sick. I hoped wine from energy-enhanced grapes might be gentler. I'd slimmed down to about 130 g now. At 170 centimeters, that was basically a normal figure, curvy even, the kind my old life's internet would have called pleasantly plump. Fair skin, big eyes, high nose. I didn't look anything like the village monster from a few months ago. One afternoon while I was cleaning fish I'd caught, Ma Annie walked up with two strangers, an old woman in her 60s with badly bound feet, and a middle-aged woman whose eyes were scanning my yard like an appraiser. My maternal grandmother and my eldest uncle's wife. They hadn't visited once in over 10 years. My mother had abandoned me at 6, and her whole family had simply forgotten I existed. Now here they were. The uncle's wife, Sun Chunying, couldn't hide her surprise at how I looked. Clearly the rumors of a 200-gene black bear hadn't been updated. She immediately started eyeing my garden, my house, my vegetables. I didn't bother with pleasantries. It's been over 10 years. Why this sudden visit? Did you hear I have money now? Sun Chunying put on an offended act and threatened to leave.
I smiled and said goodbye.
That stopped her cold. Grandma smoothed things over, scolding her daughter-in-law for being petty and claiming they'd come because they heard about my pregnancy. Sun Chunying produced their gift. 2 eggs. 2 eggs. After 12 years of silence. I stared at them, speechless. Grandpa came outside and silently stared at the 2 visitors. His presence alone was enough to make them shrink. He knew exactly what kind of people they were. When I was a little girl freezing on their doorstep, they'd set me away rather than take me in. I let them inside anyway. Refusing your own grandmother would make me look bad to the whole village, and I was curious what they wanted. Sun Chunying immediately started eyeing my sewing machine and fabric, loudly suggesting I make Grandma a new outfit. I ignored that and went to cook. She then claimed Grandma loved fish. What a coincidence that I just caught some. I didn't argue over 2 fish. Grandpa cut straight to the point. Why were they really here? Grandma put on a teary act, defending herself for forcing my mother to remarry and abandon me. She insisted they'd given money and a house to Hua Zhao's family for my care, so it wasn't their fault I ended up in a pig pen. Grandpa didn't bother arguing. Anyone who thought throwing money at the problem excused 10 years of silence wasn't worth reasoning with. Then the real purpose came out. Sun Chunying's eyes lit up as she asked about our bean sprout business. Was it true we earned 10 or 20 yuan a day? For rural families who might earn 30 to 50 yuan in an entire year after deductions, this sounded like a fantasy. The news had leaked through village wives visiting their birth families. But a strange thing had happened. No other village could produce sprouts as good as ours. Even our own women going home to help their parents got terrible results. The supply cooperative only wanted sprouts from our village. People had decided it must be our water. So Grandma made her real request. Could Grandpa help them move their whole family to our village? They wanted to cash in on the bean sprout miracle. Grandpa shut down Grandma's request without hesitation. He wasn't about to let another set of relatives move in and bully me. No matter how much she begged, he didn't budge. The 2 women ate lunch and left. I was actually surprised they gave up so easily. In the original Hua Zhao's memories, this pair used to show up at her parents' house and leave with armloads of stuff, insulting her father the whole time. Nothing he said ever stopped them. That constant meddling had ruined her parents' marriage, and I suspected it was one reason her mother remarried so quickly after her father died. I told Grandpa this wasn't over. They weren't the type to quit. Meanwhile, Grandpa had gotten adorably invested in my correspondence with Yishin. He loved hearing about what we sent each other. I'd recently mailed cherry preserves I'd baked in my clay oven, and Yishin had sent back wild tea he'd personally picked and had roasted by locals. I wrote asking him to dig up a whole tea tree and ship it to me. Right now, he was apparently up on a mountain doing exactly that. This time I was preparing small dried fish for him. Grandpa had taste-tested them already and approved. Back at the Zhang house, the whole family had been waiting anxiously for news. When Grandma and Sun Chunying came home empty-handed, the mood soured. One son said he'd warned them that showing up out of nowhere after 12 years wouldn't work. Grandma snapped at him. Easy to criticize after the fact. The real draw was the money. 300 yuan a month from bean sprouts was life-changing for a family that could barely break even on work points. One grandson was desperate. At 18, he couldn't find a wife because the family was poor and had a bad reputation. Grandma had already thought of a plan. If going directly didn't work, she'd play the long game. She ordered the eldest grandson's wife, Zhao Xiaohong, to visit me daily with her 2 little girls, offering pregnancy advice and building a relationship. No asking for favors, just be friendly for months until it stopped looking like begging. The next day, Zhao Xiaohong walked 20 miles of mountain roads carrying one toddler and leading another, both scrubbed clean. She was a timid, beaten-down woman. Her husband's family treated her terribly because she'd only produced daughters. I let her in. I wasn't warm, but I wasn't cruel either. She was a pregnant woman with 2 small children who'd just walked half a day. Whatever her family's scheming, she didn't deserve to be turned away at the door. I love children, and the 2 little girls Zhao Xiaohong brought were adorable. I offered them strawberries and grapes from my garden, but Xiaohong stopped them, saying girls weren't worth wasting good food on. She genuinely meant it. My attitude toward her cooled immediately. She launched into a speech about how daughters were useless. They eat your food, then leave to earn work points for someone else's family. Sons were the real investment. I shut her down by pointing out that her own husband's family was living proof this logic didn't work. Sons who couldn't earn enough, married to wives who only produced daughters, with grandparents subsidizing everyone forever. She couldn't argue back, but didn't leave either. She was too afraid of being beaten at home for failing her mission. I fed her lunch out of basic decency toward a pregnant woman, then told her plainly not to come back. She came anyway the next day, and the third day. Each time she grew bolder, ate more, and walked home with a lighter step. I realized she wasn't just following orders. She'd figured out that visiting me meant escaping housework, beatings, and insults for a day. I gave her 3 chances. On the 4th day, I deliberately took Grandpa mushroom picking in the mountains. My auntie intercepted Xiaohong at my gate, refusing to let her into my empty house. When Xiaohong tried to wait all day and even hinted at staying overnight, Ma auntie lost her temper publicly. She called out the whole scheme loud enough for the neighbors to hear. The Zhang family had abandoned me for 12 years, and now they were sending a stranger with 2 kids to eat my food and live in my house. Was the Zhang family so broke they were dumping children on a distant relative? Xiaohong was humiliated. People recognized her and started gossiping. Had her in-laws kicked her out for only producing girls? She grabbed her children and fled home in the dark. Before walking through her own door, she slapped herself hard across the face, messed up her hair, and walked in crying, staging it to look like I'd attacked her so she could spin the story her way. I love children, and the 2 little girls Zhao Xiaohong brought were adorable. I offered them strawberries and grapes from my garden, but Xiaohong stopped them, saying girls weren't worth wasting good food on. She genuinely meant it. My attitude toward her cooled immediately. She launched into a speech about how daughters were useless. They eat your food, then leave to earn work points for someone else's family. Sons were the real investment. I shut her down by pointing out that her own husband's family was living proof this logic didn't work. Sons who couldn't earn enough, married to wives who only produced daughters, with grandparents subsidizing everyone forever. She couldn't argue back, but didn't leave either. She was too afraid of being beaten at home for failing her mission. I fed her lunch out of basic decency toward a pregnant woman, then told her plainly not to come back. She came anyway the next day, and the third day. Each time she grew bolder, ate more, and walked home with a lighter step. I realized she wasn't just following orders. She'd figured out that visiting me meant escaping housework, beatings, and insults for a day. I gave her 3 chances. On the 4th day, I deliberately took Grandpa mushroom picking in the mountains. Ma auntie intercepted Xiaohong at my gate, refusing to let her into my empty house. When Xiaohong tried to wait all day and even hinted at staying overnight, Ma auntie lost her temper publicly. She called out the whole scheme loud enough for the neighbors to hear. The Zhang family had abandoned me for 12 years, and now they were sending a stranger with 2 kids to eat my food and live in my house. Was the Zhang family so broke they were dumping children on a distant relative? Xiaohong was humiliated. People recognized her and started gossiping. Had her in-laws kicked her out for only producing girls? She grabbed her children and fled home in the dark. Before walking through her own door, she slapped herself hard across the face, messed up her hair, and walked in crying, staging it to look like I'd attacked her, so she could spin the story her way. Zhao Xiaohong went home pretending I'd hit her. The Zhang family wasn't even surprised. They'd expected it sooner. But buried in her fake story was something real she'd overheard. I supposedly said the only Zhang family member I'd acknowledge was Zhang Guilin, my birth mother. That was all Grandma Zhang needed. She decided to go find my mother and use her as a way-in. My mother lived in the county town, working as a temporary laborer at a food factory. She still had a rural registration, so her pay and status were low. She'd remarried and had 4 more children, plus her new husband's child from a previous marriage who constantly bullied her and demanded money. She looked 50, though she was barely in her 30s, exhausted, hungry, and miserable. What I didn't know, and what made my stomach turn when I eventually pieced it together, was that Grandma Zhang had been bleeding my mother dry for years. She'd show up every 2 months, crying about how my mother owed her for getting her out of the countryside. She'd also been telling my mother that she needed money for me, claiming I was so fat and violent that Grandma had to pay me off to avoid being beaten. My mother believed it all. She skipped lunches, secretly sold her meal ration tickets, and scraped together a few yuan every month to hand over. She thought she was feeding her abandoned daughter. Now Grandma Zhang told my mother the good news. I was making money from bean sprouts, so she wouldn't need to send cash for me anymore. My mother was confused. She didn't even know I'd gotten married or was pregnant. Grandma Zhang had deliberately hidden my marriage from her, afraid that if my mother knew I had a husband and grandfather supporting me, she'd stop handing over money. Then Grandma revealed her real plan. She wanted my mother to help convince Grandpa to let the entire Zhang family relocate to our village. She framed it as wanting to be close by to take care of me after Grandpa died and protect me from Hua Zhao's family. My mother, the woman who'd abandoned me at 6, who'd been too weak to stand up to anyone her entire life, was now being weaponized against me by her own mother. While I was busy at home, Grandma Zhang was manipulating my birth mother. What I didn't know at the time, and only pieced together later, was how deep the lies went. Grandma Zhang told my mother that I'd specifically asked to see her, that I'd softened now that I was pregnant and understood what motherhood meant. Pure fiction, of course. The idea actually came from Zhao Xiaohong, who was hoping a reunion between me and my mother would end in a fight, ideally. One stressful enough to cause a miscarriage. Grandma Zhang also told my mother not to mention any of the money or gifts she'd been sending over the years. Give Hua Zhao some face, she said. Don't embarrass her. In reality, she was protecting her own scam. If my mother ever talked to me honestly, she'd discover that none of that money had ever reached me. Grandma Zhang had pocketed every yuan. My mother agreed to visit. She was relieved to hear I'd married well, and actually smiled for the first time in what seemed like years. She requested a day off from her factory job, enduring her co-workers' mockery. They looked down on her for being a rural remarried woman and sneered that her daughter had probably married some nobody. My mother said nothing to defend me or herself. She never did. She went home, cleaned the house, cooked dinner for her husband's entire family, washed everyone's clothes, and waited until they were all asleep before she could rest. Her life was nothing but work, hunger, and silence. She had a husband who beat her, stepchildren who extorted her, co-workers who mocked her, and a mother who robbed her blind. And tomorrow she was coming to see the daughter she'd abandoned 12 years ago, carrying a load of guilt and a head full of lies. My birth mother, Zhang Guilin, came to find me that morning, though I didn't know it yet. The night before, she'd crept into her storage room and pulled out a hidden pencil case with over 20 yuan inside. She'd been secretly saving this money for years, meant to be a dowry for me when I eventually married. Based on what Grandma Zhang had told her, she'd expected me to end up an old maid married off to some disabled man. Learning I'd married a soldier made her genuinely happy for the first time in ages. In the moonlight, I'm told she actually looked beautiful. The worry lines faded, and you could see traces of the pretty girl she'd once been. She arrived at the village without telling her husband, too ashamed to be seen by anyone. She went to her old house first, not knowing it now belonged to Third Bull's family and that I lived somewhere else. Jiang Qin answered the door and barely recognized her. The former village beauty now looked like a 50-year-old woman, gaunt and worn down. Jiang Qin couldn't help laughing before catching herself. Then my mother said something that changed everything. When Jiang Qin accused her of never caring about me, she protested, "But I send Hua Zhao money and things every month. My mother delivers them." Jiang Qin's eyes went wide. In over 10 years, Grandma Zhang had never once set foot in our village, not until a few days ago when she came begging about bean sprouts. The truth hit my mother like a wall. Every yuan she'd scraped together by skipping meals, every beating she'd endured from her husband for sending money to her mother, none of it had ever reached me. Her own mother had been pocketing everything for over a decade, using me as a prop for the scam. Jiang Qin, barely containing her glee at this drama, grabbed my mother's arm. "Come on, let's go ask Hua Zhao directly. She never lies. We can settle this face to face." I was in the garden replacing vegetables that had finished their cycle. I'd accidentally over-accelerated everything and needed to replant before people noticed my garden was dying while everyone else's was thriving. I was eating a homegrown watermelon when Jiang Qin showed up at my gate shouting for me to come see a visitor. I turned around expecting another greedy relative. Instead, I saw a woman who looked like she could be Grandma Zhang's sister, thin, exhausted, and decades older than she should have been. Then it clicked. This was my mother. The original Hua Zhao's memories showed a beautiful, gentle young woman. The person standing before me looked 50, not 30-something. But I recognized her eyes. "Mom, why are you here?" I asked, genuinely surprised. She burst into tears the moment I called her Mom. She'd been terrified I'd scream at her or attack her. Jiang Qin was disappointed I wasn't angrier. She'd been hoping for drama. Jiang Qin wasted no time dropping the bomb. "Your grandmother told your mother she's been visiting you every month for years, bringing you money and gifts. Did you ever get any of that?" I looked at my mother. Never. Not once. Not a single grain of rice or a single fin. Her face went white. For over a decade, she'd been starving herself to save money, enduring beatings from her husband for sending it to Grandma Zhang, all because the old woman claimed it was for me. 2 or 3 yuan a month every month for 12 years. Over 300 yuan total, pocketed by her own mother. Everything Grandma Zhang had told her was lies. I wasn't fat. I wasn't ugly. I wasn't violent. She'd invented a monster version of me to keep the scam going. My mother looked like her world was crumbling. Jiang Qin kept twisting the knife with fake sympathy, clearly enjoying every second. I told Jiang Qin to leave, pulled my mother inside, and locked the gate. She shrank when she saw Grandpa, her former father-in-law. They'd never actually met before. I sat her down, poured her a glass of homemade fruit juice, and said gently, "Tell us everything. From the beginning." My mother's voice was small and shaky as she told me everything. For over a decade, Grandma Zhang had been visiting her, even taking illegal train rides to the provincial capital to collect money. Every time, the excuse was the same. "Hua Zhao is hungry. Hua Zhao needs things." My mother had starved herself, endured beatings from her husband, and scraped together 2 or 3 yuan every month, believing it was keeping me alive. "Your grandmother really never came?" "Not even once," she asked, still hoping. "Not once," I said. "The whole village can confirm it," she crumbled. I watched her and felt something unexpected. I actually liked this woman. She wasn't heartless. She was just painfully naive, cursed with a mother who exploited her kindness without mercy. I offered to get her money back. She shook her head immediately, not out of forgiveness, but practicality. "You can't beat her," she said, looking at me with genuine concern. "She's too clever." I laughed. At least she wasn't the blindly loyal type. She also figured the money was already spent on her nephew's wedding and future bride prices for the Zhang boys. Grandpa excused himself, but not before telling me to cook her a proper meal: braised fish, braised pork, and white rice. That small gesture of acceptance made her cry silently into her hands. When I asked about her current husband, she said casually that he hit her when he drank. She was confused by my shock. In her world, men beating their wives was completely normal. I held my tongue. Some cultural gaps can't be bridged in one conversation. She'd had 4 more children with her second husband, 2 boys and 2 girls. Because she still had a rural registration, her kids couldn't get city food rations. Her husband's family fed and raised them, which meant she had 0 leverage at home. Then I asked the question that lit up her eyes. Do you want to make money? I told her she was still registered in our village. She could come back to our village, grow bean sprouts, and earn over 300 yuan a month. Can I really come back? She asked, her voice full of desperate hope. I told my mother the truth. Her household registration was still in our village, so coming back was just a matter of Grandpa saying the word. She was nervous about asking her former father-in-law for help, but the possibility of earning real money lit something up in her. I'd actually been rethinking the whole bean sprout economy. When Yi Shun told me the national average annual wage was only 575 yuan, I realized that 300 yuan per month per household was dangerously high. If word spread further, we'd attract national attention, newspapers, investigations, maybe arrests. The village women were already bragging to relatives 100 miles away. So I planned to quietly scale things back, letting each family earn maybe 30 to 50 yuan a month. Still life-changing, but not headline-making. My mother's confidence was fragile, so when I hedged about the exact earnings, she almost backed out. I took her to my storage shed instead. Seeing the walls lined with dried vegetables, racks of grapes, and mountains of pumpkins and potatoes convinced her more than any number could. In the countryside, you might not have cash, but you'd never go hungry. Can I really earn 20 yuan a month from sprouts? She asked quietly. Absolutely, I said. And even if the cooperative stops buying, we can always sell them ourselves. You told Dad that once, remember? Her eyes filled with tears. I'd quoted something she'd said to my father when I was 5, her idea to sell bean sprouts to earn money for his medicine. He'd refused, and then he died. She agreed to come back. I fed her the best meal she'd had in years, and she left looking 10 years younger. Before going, she pressed a handkerchief full of money into my hands, her entire savings, meant as a belated wedding gift. I took it without arguing. That mattered to her. She promised to return as soon as tomorrow. She also refused to let me ride the bicycle to the train station, worried about my pregnancy. I sent Ma Auntie to take her instead. When she got home to the Liu family, she was half an hour late. Her husband, his parents, and his eldest son from his first marriage were sitting around an empty kitchen with dark expressions, waiting for her to cook. The stepson, Liu Tsong, had already found out she'd taken the day off to visit her brat from before. Her co-worker had mockingly asked him about wedding candy. He'd gone straight home to tell his father. I didn't witness what happened to my mother that evening, but I learned about it later. When she got home half an hour late, Liu Xianqian was already furious. His stepson Liu Tsong had tipped him off about her secret visit to me. Without even letting her explain, he slapped her across the face twice and beat her for 10 minutes straight. His excuse was the money she'd stolen from the family to give me, though it was only ever her own skipped lunch money. The truth was, he regretted marrying her. He'd paid a high bride price for a beauty who'd aged into an old woman practically overnight. Everyone mocked him for it. Beating her was just how he handled that humiliation. My mother waited until the beating stopped, cooked dinner for everyone while her body ached all over, then stood watching the family eat without touching food herself. Sitting down to eat after being punished would have earned her another beating. After dinner, she gathered her courage and spoke up, probably for the first time in years. She wanted to go back to the countryside to grow bean sprouts. Liu Xianqian nearly exploded, thinking she was leaving him. She quickly explained about the supply cooperative sprouts and how she knew the technique. Liu Tsong sneered. Her homemade sprouts had never tasted like the ones from the store. She explained it was about the water in our village. The Liu family did the math. At 20 fun per gene, even with daily limits and occasional failures, the earnings were substantial. Liu Xianqian's father made the decision. She could go, but every cent she earned would come back to the Liu household. They'd been raising her for children all these years, after all. Then Lu Xianxian's mother added her own conditions. Take the two youngest girls back with her, less mouths to feed at home, and plant extra vegetables to send back to the city. My mother agreed to everything, head bowed. The old man nodded approvingly. That was what he liked about having a rural wife. A city woman would never be this obedient. After my mother left, I needed to solve her housing problem. She couldn't stay at our place. Having her live under the same roof as Grandpa, her former father-in-law, would be awkward for everyone. But she already had a house. The one she'd left behind when she remarried, the one Hua Shan's third son and Jiang Qin had been living in for 11 years. I told Grandpa my plan, and he just said, "Don't get in any fights, you're pregnant. I promise to handle it with words." Grandpa fetched the village leader Zhao Liangkai, who dug out the original agreement from years ago. They brought along the village militia, just in case. I stood in the yard and announced loudly, "Third uncle, third aunt, I'm here for the house." The whole village came running to watch. Third bull grabbed a hoe and threatened me. Jiang Qin tried a clever approach, arguing that one family couldn't have two properties. I shut that down. The house wasn't for me, it was for my mother, who was moving back. Her registration was still in our village, and the house was still in her name. Jiang Qin was stunned that my mother was returning. She tried stalling, but I played my strongest card. Give the house back, or I'll report you. When I file complaints, I always win. You might lose more than a house, you might lose your job as village accountant too. That terrified her. She'd been a village accountant for years and couldn't imagine going back to manual labor. When Third Bull charged at me with the hoe, she yanked him back herself. The idiot was about to get her fired. But she wasn't ready to surrender completely. She switched tactics. Fine, the house is your mother's. But we've maintained it for 11 years. New roof every year, kept the yard from going wild. You owe us a maintenance fee. Jiang Qin demanded 500 yuan as a maintenance fee for taking care of my mother's house for 11 years. The neighbors burst out laughing. Everyone knew what roof repairs actually cost, and it was nowhere near that. I played along. So you're saying this house is worth 500 yuan? She insisted it was worth every penny. Great. Then I'll sell it to you for 500. She froze. The crowd roared with laughter. I'd turned her own greed against her. She'd been living in someone else's house for free for a decade, and now she was trying to charge the owner. After some back and forth with the village leader stepping in, we settled on 150 yuan, which was the fair market price. I'd never planned to keep that house anyway. It was where my mother and father had lived together, where I was born, where he died. It wouldn't feel right for my remarried mother to move back in there. Better to start fresh somewhere new. I also didn't want to squeeze Jiang Qin too hard. Pushing the Hua Zhao clan to desperation would only make life harder for my soft-natured mother when she moved back. I picked a small flat plot near my current house for the new homestead. It was a spot nobody wanted because it was too small and backed up against dense brush. The village leader said I could clear as much land behind it as I could manage. I started pulling up bushes and small trees by hand, ripping them out of the ground like weeds. Even Zhao Liangkai was speechless. The strongest man in the village couldn't match my strength. But I had a trick nobody could see. Before pulling each plant, I drained its root energy through the pendant, leaving it intact on the surface, but dead underneath. They came out like pulling scallions from soft dirt. I limited the yard to 1 mu. My mother was too gentle to defend anything bigger. If I gave her twice what everyone else had, it would only create problems. I also realized my powers were growing. When I first got the pendant, I could only exchange energy blindly. Now I could precisely control the flow inside plants, draining specific parts while keeping the rest alive. 2 months of practice had made a real difference, and I suspected there was still more to discover. That evening, my mother tried asking her children if they wanted to come to the countryside with her. The 2 boys refused immediately. The older one yelled at her with the same anger his father always showed. The girls had no choice. Their grandmother had ordered them to go. 6-year-old Daqin was upset, and 4-year-old Xiaoqin was too young to understand. When my mother reached out to touch Xiaoqin's face, the little girl flinched away. Grandma Lu punished her whenever she showed affection toward her own mother. My mother sighed. She'd been working constantly since they were born, only getting 7 days off for each delivery before handing the babies to her mother-in-law. The old woman had turned all the children against her. In their eyes, she was useless, the rural woman whose bad status had cursed them all. The next morning, my mother and the two girls boarded the train with nothing but a small bundle of clothes. No food. Grandma Lu said they didn't have city rations, so they didn't deserve any. Their sister in the countryside could feed them. I was waiting at the station with my bicycle. When my mother saw me, she couldn't believe I'd actually come to meet her. "What if I hadn't come today?" she asked, eyes red. "Then I'd have been here tomorrow. And the next day. And then I'd send someone to check on you." She wiped her tears, then awkwardly introduced the two girls. They stared up at me. I clearly didn't match the monster their grandmother had described. Then little Xiaoqin burst into tears. "Sister, please don't eat me. I don't taste good." I laughed so hard I had to hold my stomach. I wasn't even 3 months along yet and couldn't afford to laugh that violently. Apparently, Grandma Zhang had been telling her grandchildren that I ate small children. "Don't worry," I told Xiaoqin, winking.
I don't eat people.
"Actually, it's your grandma who eats people." Xiaoqin's lips started trembling again.
Kidding.
"Let's go home. Dinner's getting cold." At the word dinner, both girls' eyes lit up. They'd spent their whole lives being told to eat less and be grateful for every bite their grandparents grudgingly shared. They'd never once eaten until they were full. As we walked, I asked my mother what conditions the Liu family had set. She said calmly that she had to hand over all her earnings. She was already planning to secretly grow extra sprouts and sell them on the side without the Liu family knowing. She didn't say this out loud, though. Her own daughters would report her. I decided to quietly scale back the village's bean sprout success rate. From now on, only 2 or 3 batches out of 10 would turn out well, instead of 6 or 7. People would produce less, risk less, and earn maybe 30 yuan a month. Enough to change their lives, not enough to put a target on anyone's back. My mother arrived at the train station with the two girls and nothing but a small bundle of clothes. No food. Her mother-in-law had made sure of that. I was waiting with my bicycle and a big smile. Back home, I served them a proper meal. Braised fish, red-cooked pork, white rice, and cold vegetable dishes. Daqin and Xiaoqin sat frozen at the table, chopsticks in hand, unable to believe the food was actually for them. At their father's house, meat was for the men. They couldn't remember the last time they'd eaten any. I kept putting food in their bowls since they were too scared to serve themselves. Little Xiaoqin smiled shyly. The people-eating sister was feeding her pork. Daqin ate with tears dropping silently into her rice. My mother insisted on washing the dishes. I let her. It made her feel less guilty about being here. I explained my plan. She'd stay with us temporarily, while we built her a small house on the plot I'd cleared nearby. Mud brick walls, wooden beams borrowed from the village. Maybe a week of work. She knew how to build. She and my father had built their first house together. I didn't mention the 150 yuan from selling the old house. The girls had been trained to report everything back to their grandparents, and that money would vanish the moment Liu's family heard about it. We started a batch of bean sprouts, right away. My mother insisted on recording the 5 gene of green beans as a loan. She wanted clean accounts between us, since any money she earned belonged to the Liu family. I agreed. If they claimed her income, they could cover her costs too. Daqin and Xiaoqin jumped in to help without being asked twice. These weren't spoiled children. At 6, Daqin could already cook meals and wash her little sister's clothes. I felt sorry for them, but didn't stop them from working. Children in this era grew up fast. Making them helpless wouldn't do them any favors. Afterward, I picked 2 bunches of grapes for them. They'd been staring at the fruit-filled storage shed the whole time, but hadn't dared even look too long. "What is this?" Xiaoqin asked, holding up a grape she'd never seen before. As they ate, the 2 girls glanced at each other with tears in their eyes. This sister didn't eat children. She fed them grapes. I seized the moment. "Just so you know, the one who actually eats people is your grandma. Stay away from her. Don't tell her anything. She's a liar." Both girls nodded solemnly. We won't believe her anymore. Every single thing their grandmother had told them had turned out to be false. That lesson, at least, was now permanently learned. My mother stood on her new plot of land, beaming. A stream ran alongside it, mountains rose behind it, and farmland stretched out front. She'd have her own home for the first time in over a decade. No more living under someone else's roof. No more watching every word and every bite. Da-Chin and Xiao-Chin weren't thrilled about a dirt house at first, but when my mother promised they could grow whatever they wanted to eat, their eyes went wide. They started rattling off every fruit and vegetable they'd ever tasted. It was the first time they'd ever felt excited about being with their mother. Then I did something deliberate. I sat the girls down and carefully started undoing years of poisoning by their grandparents. I explained that their mother earned 25 yuan a month, enough to buy them plenty of food. But her entire salary was taken by their grandparents, who spent it on themselves and their favorite grandson. Their mother wasn't neglecting them because she didn't care. She was neglecting them because she had literally nothing left to give. I told them, "Don't blame your mother. Blame the people who took her money and told you she was useless." I knew exactly what I was doing. In my past life as a criminal lawyer, I'd used this same technique to break apart loyal accomplices. I was deliberately driving a wedge between these children and the Lu grandparents who'd turned them against their own mother. Was it manipulative? Absolutely. But everything I told them was true. And I despised adults who poison children against their parents. When I imagined someone doing that to my own babies, it made my heart ache. 6-year-old Da-Chin was sharp enough to follow the logic. She suddenly blurted out, "Grandpa and Grandma saved 400 yuan. I heard them say it's still not enough for Big Brother's bride price. For 100 yuan, scraped together from my mother's wages and her father's salary, while the younger children went hungry. All to buy Lu Tsong, the stepson who bullied my mother, his 3 spinning, 1 singing wedding package." I smiled and filed that information away. Then I asked my mother how old Lu Tsong was. My mother and I chatted while clearing weeds on her new plot. She seemed lighter than I'd ever seen her, physically doing hard labor in the countryside, yet more relaxed than she'd been in a decade. She told me about the drama at the Lu household. Lu Tsong, her 24-year-old stepson, wanted to marry an 18-year-old girl from the food factory. The girl's family was demanding 200 yuan cash plus the full 3 spinning, 1 singing package. Grandma Lu refused. She didn't want a high-maintenance daughter-in-law she'd have to bow to. But the girl's family had leverage. If the Lius didn't agree, they'd report Lu Tsong for hooliganism, since the girl was already pregnant. I couldn't help laughing. What a perfect match for a terrible family. I told my mother to just stay in the village and not go back. She agreed, without hesitation. In the countryside, between the garden, the private plots, work points from the production team, and even a little bean sprout money, she could feed her children better than she ever had in the city. Why go back to be beaten and starved? That night, after the girls fell asleep, I secretly gave my mother the 150 yuan from selling the old house. She pushed it right back, insisting the house had belonged to me and my father, not her. She wanted it to be my dowry, a gift from my dad. She asked about Yi Shen, her eyes sparkling. She'd heard about the 2,000 yuan bride price and the 3 spinning, 1 singing, and could hardly believe it. I blushed and confirmed everything, telling her he was handsome and kind. Then I got to business. I showed her a basket of failed sprouts, perfectly good ones that the cooperative wouldn't take. I asked her to sell them at the black market in the county town tomorrow. She refused any share of the money, insisting she was just running an errand for her daughter. She left at dawn the next morning, a 100-jean basket on her back, heading to the early morning market without a trace of fear. She'd been doing this since she was a child. My mother sold the failed sprouts at the black market before dawn. They weren't as perfect as the supply cooperative's product, so she priced them at 1/10, just 1 fin per jean instead of 3. Buyers tasted them, eyes went wide, and the entire basket was gone in minutes. She vanished into the pre-dawn darkness before anyone could pay too much attention. She came home glowing, clutching 10 yuan. For the first time in her life, she could see a future with hope in it. I counted the money happily, quietly setting aside a few special bills, date red and greenback, 1 jiao notes that would be worth thousands in the future. No way was I spending those. My plan was working. I'd keep the village's average earnings around 30 yuan a month, safe, unremarkable. But my mother was different. She was family, and her income would stay between us. She'd never tell a soul. Her first batch of sprouts was already sprouting after just one day. She credited the village water. I smiled and agreed. The house building started that same day. Grandpa had arranged for bricks to be bought from a neighboring village, and Zhao Yangkai rounded up the village men to help. In the countryside, people built each other's houses for free. You just had to feed them. I'd already prepared mountains of vegetables with Daqin and Xiaoqin's help, and Ma Annie showed up with her crew to cook. My mother was moved nearly to tears again when she saw everything arranged. The village leader told her quietly that Grandpa had organized it all. And thanks to me spreading the true story about Grandma Zhang's con, the villagers no longer looked at my mother with contempt. They smiled and greeted her warmly. That afternoon, Ma Auntie mentioned something concerning. The whole village's sprout success rate had dropped sharply. The cooperative only collected about 1,000 jin instead of the usual 2,000. Everyone's batches had failed, including mine. They turned to me for an explanation. I put on a worried face and blamed the summer heat. Bean sprouts are extremely sensitive to temperature, I said. Even a tiny change can ruin a whole batch. Everyone nodded sadly. You can't argue with the weather. The village women gathered under my grape arbor, eating watermelon and discussing why my fruit tasted better than theirs. I gave them a lecture about watering techniques, morning versus evening, sunny versus cloudy days. All gardening knowledge from my past life that sounded impressively scientific. They ate it up. At lunch, the men building my mother's house couldn't stop sneaking glances at me. The unmarried ones were kicking themselves. Months ago, Grandpa had been practically begging for a son-in-law, and they'd all run the other direction. Now they would have camped at our doorstep if they could. The women found their own explanation for my transformation. I must be carrying a girl. There's an old saying that daughters beautify their mothers during pregnancy. Everyone agreed, and I just smiled and rubbed my belly. I'd love both. Even better if they came as a pair. They laughed at my dream of twins, though Ma Auntie defended me. Everyone started promising gifts if I actually had twins, pig trotters, chickens, fish. It was sweet. The real reason nobody questioned my dramatic change was that the old Hua Zhao had barely left the house. Villagers had only ever caught brief glimpses of her. Their memory was vague, just fat and dark. After weeks of seeing my new face daily, the old image simply faded. Meanwhile, my mother's house was finished in 7 days. She'd been selling my failed sprouts at the black market every morning, earning steady money through loyal repeat customers who recognized the quality difference. But the village sprout business was declining exactly as I'd planned. Success rates dropped to the point where most families could only produce small amounts. Some clever villagers tried different containers, but I only rewarded the first person to innovate, keeping everyone guessing about why results were so inconsistent. Outside our village, other communities had started selling their own ordinary sprouts at the black market too. The competition was growing, and my mother worried about the future. Then we stopped selling sprouts and sell something else, I told her. The garden vegetables are about to go to waste if we don't pick them. It was time to move on anyway. Even my closest friends in the village had started secretly checking my sprout baskets, and people were watching my mother's daily trips to the train station with suspicion. If I was failing too, how come she still had sprouts to sell? With bean sprouts winding down, I had plenty of other things to sell. My garden was overproducing like crazy, and the storage shed was already packed with dried vegetables. My mother wanted to save everything for winter, but I had more than 10 people could eat. I took Daqin and Xiaoqin mushroom hunting in the mountains. After a recent rain, conditions were perfect. As I walked through the forest, mushrooms happened to pop up along my path, the pendant's energy exchange at work, hidden from the girls by tall grass. They just thought we'd found an incredible spot. I taught them which mushrooms were safe and which were poisonous, information I got by simply asking the mushrooms themselves. Both girls learned with deadly seriousness once they heard wrong choices could kill people. At 4 and 6 years old, they worked without a single complaint, sweat dripping down their faces. I promised them each a tenth of whatever we earned. Daqin's eyes went huge. She'd never had her own money before. Little Xiaoqin just wanted to know if we could eat mushrooms for dinner. We made 3 trips that day, filling 6 or 7 large baskets. In just over a week of eating properly, both girls had already gained weight and color. I'd made them new clothes too, but they were so unaccustomed to nice things that they just stroked the fabric and hid the outfits away. That evening I went to Ma Annie and Sister Lu's houses. I showed them where the mushrooms were. Sharing was essential to avoid jealousy, and asked if they'd accompany my mother to sell vegetables and mushrooms at the county black market tomorrow. They agreed immediately. With the sprout business failing, they needed new income anyway, and they'd been selling mountain goods at the black market for years. As we sat planning our morning trip to the county town, I had no idea that at that very moment, someone in the county was planning a morning trip to our village. What I didn't know at the time was that trouble was brewing at the Lu household. After my mother left with the 2 girls, Grandma Lu quickly realized she'd made a mistake. With no one to cook, clean, and do laundry, she was stuck doing everything herself. After a week and a half, her old body couldn't take it.
She wanted my mother dragged back.
But Lu Tsong, the stepson, was fixated on the bean sprout money. He desperately needed cash to marry his pregnant girlfriend before her family reported him for assault. When Grandma Lu told him the sprout business had collapsed, he panicked. She blamed my mother for being a jinx. The whole village's sprouts had failed right after she arrived. Lu Tsong decided to visit the village himself to see what my mother was really earning. He also figured he could grab some free vegetables to bring to his girlfriend's family. The next morning, my mother went to the black market with Ma Andy and Sister Lu. They sold vegetables, dried mushrooms, and watermelons. My mother's loyal customers were already waiting. They'd buy anything she brought. A watermelon cracked during transport, and the smell was so incredible that people nearly fought over the remaining ones. Lu Tsong happened to be passing through and caught sight of her. Instead of approaching, he hid in the shadows and watched. He saw how fast everything sold, watched the money change hands, then followed the 3 women onto the train back to our village. He trailed my mother to her new house and saw the yard covered in drying mushrooms, easily 100 jin worth, which meant 100 yuan at market price. His eyes lit up. "Nice place, Annie Zhang," he said, stepping up to the fence. My mother froze. She was genuinely afraid of this young man. He'd beaten her regularly from the time he was 13 until he was about 20, sometimes worse than his father did. She never dared fight back. The entire Lu clan would have come down on her. He asked if the mushrooms were hers. She lied immediately, said they belonged to a neighbor who was borrowing her yard to dry them. It was the first time she'd ever lied to him, but she had to. If he found out the truth, he'd take everything, not just today's haul, but every future harvest. She knew exactly what kind of person he was. I was coming back from mushroom picking with Daqin and Xiaoqin when I heard shouting from my mother's yard. Lu Tsong had let himself in and was screaming at her about money. He was claiming that the Lu family had fed her and her brats for 10 years, and she owed them everything she'd ever earned. My mother was clutching a broom, shoulders hunched, backing away from him, the same posture of a woman who'd been beaten into submission for a decade. But I noticed she actually tried to push back this time, quietly pointing out that her wages had covered her share. That was new. My little speech to the girls had gotten through to her too. I stepped in behind Lu Tsong. "Funny, first time I've heard a man act like feeding his own wife and children deserves a lifetime of gratitude." He spun around, ready to curse, and then just
Froze.
He stared at me with his mouth hanging open. Whatever Grandma Zhang had told him about me clearly didn't match the person standing in front of him. Then I noticed the 2 girls trembling behind me, gripping my clothes. I asked if he'd hit them before. They glanced at him and said nothing, which told me everything. He mumbled that he only ever hit them, lightly. Their faces said otherwise. When he tried to grab the strap of my basket, his hand reaching suspiciously close to my chest, I slapped his hand away. The crack was louder than I expected. His hand went limp, then swelled. "I'd broken something," he screamed. I honestly hadn't meant to hit that hard, but it was done. The whole village came running within minutes. Lu Tsong stood there holding his wrist, white-faced and sweating, clearly in real pain. I put on my most innocent expression. He's faking it. I barely tapped him. Lightly. The village leader Zhao Liangkai asked what happened. I played the helpless pregnant girl card. I'm just a woman. How much strength could I possibly have? He's trying to extort me. She's right, Zhao Liangkai said, not entirely convincingly. He turned to the crowd for backup. Right? Absolutely. Everyone agreed cheerfully. Nobody needed to think about it. Between their neighbor who taught them to make money and fed them at her wedding, versus some beady-eyed stranger who'd barged into their village, the choice was obvious. Family first, fairness second. I lied without blinking. He came to demand money from my mother. When she didn't have any, he tried to take it from me. I defended myself. The villagers believed me instantly. Lu Tsong tried to protest that he'd only been helping me with my basket, but I trapped him with a simple question. So you're not here to take my mother's money? And you'll never come asking for money again? He opened his mouth, realized I was baiting him into a promise he'd never keep, and went silent. That silence told everyone everything they needed to know. The crowd turned on him completely. City folk coming to beg from country people, they sneered. When he screamed about his broken hand and demanded my mother pay for treatment, Grandpa doubled down. Nobody saw her hit you. You fell on purpose to scam us. Everyone backed him up. It was shameless. But Lu Tsong had sealed his own fate when he threatened to report us all for speculation and profiteering at the black market. Every person in the village had sold something on that market. He'd just threatened the entire community. They beat him all the way to the train station and didn't stop until he was physically on the train. He arrived home with a swollen face, torn clothes, and a hand broken in 3 places. Ma Auntie pulled my mother aside when she'd tried to give him money. Are you stupid? Pay him once, and he'll bleed you forever. My mother whispered that she had no money. Good girl, she was learning. Back at the Lu house, Lu Tsong cried to his grandmother. He couldn't remember my name, just called me that bear creature, based on what Grandma Zhang had always said. Though privately he thought I was anything but actually very pretty, just ruthless. Grandma, I want her to pay me back, he whined. He was out of ideas himself, but his grandmother always had schemes. And surely the villagers wouldn't beat up an old woman. While I was dealing with the aftermath at home, the Lu family was scheming in ways I wouldn't learn about until later. Grandma Lu was furious about Lu Tsong's broken hand and wanted to drag my mother back to Caodao and apologize. But Lu Xianqian, my mother's husband, had other plans entirely. He wanted to divorce her. It turned out he'd been flirting with a widow at the food factory, a woman named Zhu. She was curvy, flirtatious, had a steady job with a 45 yuan salary, and most importantly, full city registration. Her 3 children all had urban ration books too, meaning they wouldn't eat from the Lu family's quota. Financially, she was a better deal than my mother in every way.
Liu Gong panicked.
He didn't want a new stepmother who was tough and had brothers who'd fight back. My mother was obedient and easy to bully. He preferred keeping her. He made his case with money. He'd watched my mother sell 3 baskets of goods that morning, watermelons, vegetables, and dried mushrooms, earning about 30 yuan in one trip. Even if it wasn't consistent year-round, the seasonal earnings from her garden and the mountains could add up to hundreds of yuan annually. Grandma Lu wavered. 300 yuan a year from a wife who did everything you told her, versus 45 a month from a sharp-tongued widow who'd never hand over a penny? The math was complicated. Lu Xianqian didn't care about math. He didn't want to sleep alone. Then Lu Tsong's mind drifted to me. He'd been thinking about how beautiful I was ever since I'd broken his hand. He'd heard from the villagers, while they were kicking him, that my husband was military and rarely home. In his mind, a pretty rural girl probably didn't need much bride price. If only he'd known about me sooner, he wouldn't be in this mess with his pregnant girlfriend. Grandma, I'm coming with you tomorrow, he announced. He had plans. None of them were good. I'd guessed the Lu family would come back, so I was ready. I'd invited every woman I was friendly with to hang out in my yard, a dozen tough village wives eating fruit and cracking sunflower seeds. If the Lius wanted to bring numbers, so could I. Lu Xianqian hadn't come. He was too busy chasing the factory widow. But he'd sent Grandma Lu, Lu Tsong with his broken hand in a cast, and both of my mother's sons. The boys were leverage. Hand over your money, or we dump your kids on you. While we waited, Ma Auntie told the other women the full story of my mother's second marriage, how Grandma Zhang had forced her into it, threatening to drown herself unless my mother married Lu Xianqian. How the Zhang brothers had physically dragged her away. How she tried to leave me with her own family but they refused, so she had no choice but to entrust me to Hua Zhao's household. The women were furious on my mother's behalf. Terrible birth family, terrible in-laws. The poor woman had been trapped her entire life. My mother spotted her 2 boys and nearly broke down. I steadied her. They're either here to be dumped on you or used as hostages for money. Either way, don't panic. She's got Hua Zhao, Ma Auntie declared loudly. That girl tamed the Hua Shan clan. These city weaklings are nothing. I turned to Da Qin and Xiao Qin, who were pressed against my back like little shadows. Remember, never bully anyone first. But if someone bullies you, fight back. And if you can't win, come tell me. I'll handle it. Both girls nodded hard, glowing. They'd never had anyone stand up for them before. Then Grandma Lu marched through the gate, like she owned the place. She glared at the women eating watermelon, her watermelon, as she saw it, and barked at my mother to fetch water and cut her a fresh one. My mother brought Grandma Lu a cup of water, the only cup we had. The old woman drank it, then smashed the cup on the ground and started screaming. How dare my mother not give water to her own children first? What kind of heartless mother was she? It was a textbook manipulation move, and I'd seen it 1,000 times in my legal career. I dismantled it in front of everyone. You got the water first because that's how it always works at your house. You eat first, then your son, then maybe the children, and my mother gets nothing. You could have given the boys your cup. Instead, you drank it yourself, smashed it, and now you're blaming the one person in your family who has zero power to change anything. The 2 boys blinked, processing this. I kept going. Now you've broken the only cup, and you're going to pick a fight for an hour. Those kids will stay thirsty the whole time. You don't care about them at all. You just want to cause trouble and look like the victim. Grandma Lu was choking on her own rage. Everything I said was true, and worse, I'd said it clearly enough for the children to understand. I could see the doubt forming in their eyes. I told my mother to get water for the boys, with a ladle. Out of habit, she almost handed it to Lu Xianqian first. I stopped her loudly. Children first. Didn't your mother-in-law just say she's so worried about the kids? She was so upset, she smashed a cup over it. When my mother offered the ladle to the boys, Grandma Lu snapped, "Don't you dare." The boys flinched and didn't take it.
See, I said.
She doesn't actually want the children to drink first. She never did. She's been doing this your whole lives, blocking your mother from caring for you, then blaming her for not caring. 10-year-old Dawe's expression changed. He was old enough to remember dozens of moments just like this one. The realization hit him visibly. Grandma Lu exploded, screaming that this was her daughter-in-law's house, and everyone should get out. The village women fired back that the house was in my mother's name only. When Grandma Lu claimed everything belonging to her daughter-in-law belonged to the Lu family, I asked sweetly whether that meant my mother also owned a share of the Lu family's city apartment. Dream on. That's our ancestral home, she sputtered. The village women were ready to drag her to the authorities. I held them back. Getting physical with an old woman would only create problems. Besides, her bluster was already deflating. Just calm down and tell us why you're really here, I said, handing the ladle back to the boys. This time, Grandma Lu didn't dare stop them from drinking. Grandma Lu finally asked who I was. When I said I was Zhang Guilan's eldest daughter, both she and Lu Xianqian were stunned. I looked nothing like the monster Grandma Zhang had described. She tried demanding compensation for Lu Tsong's broken hand. I denied everything and asked the village women if anyone had witnessed me hit him. Nope, they all said in perfect unison, some grinning shamelessly. When Grandma Lu threatened to go to the police, I casually mentioned that the head of the County Armed Forces Department was practically family and that he'd personally delivered my wedding gifts by military truck. The Lu family were ordinary people with zero connections. They backed down immediately. Grandma Lu switched to guilt-tripping my mother, asking for money to feed Lu Tsong while his hand healed. My mother pulled out her only official earnings, 4 yuan from 10 days of Sprout sales. The old woman snatched it, clearly disappointed. Then came the real power move. Lu Xianqian shoved both boys toward us. These are your brats. Keep them. He wanted to leave the children and go home. Grandma Lu upped the stakes. Give her 500 yuan for Lu Tsung's medical bills, or the boys would never go back to city schools. She knew exactly how to weaponize children against a mother. Dawei started crying. He didn't want to stay in the countryside. My mother looked at me desperately. I asked if there was a school nearby. Ma Auntie said yes, 5 miles away. Problem solved. Your grades are terrible anyway, I told Dawei bluntly. You're near the bottom in the city. In a village school, you might actually rank near the top for once. He blinked, his tears drying as he processed that logic. Then I cut open a melon and handed halves to Daqin and Xiaoqin. The fragrance hit the boys like a wave. I pointed to my garden bursting with vegetables and fruit, mentioned my 4 pigs and dozens of chickens and ducks. You think the countryside is bad? You've been lied to. Ask your sisters how they've been eating. Daqin and Xiaoqin nodded enthusiastically from behind me, cheeks rounder than they'd been a week ago. For 2 boys who'd never eaten well in their lives, the promise of unlimited food was far more powerful than any school ranking. They stopped crying. Grandma Lu was furious that the boys had been swayed by promises of food, but she played her final card. You want the kids? Pay 500 yuan for everything we spent raising them. The village women were outraged, but technically the old woman had a point. The children had rural registration and no city food rations. Every grain they'd eaten had come from the grandparents' share. I went home and came back with 500 yuan. But before handing it over, I set my terms carefully. This money covers the food costs for all 4 children, Dawei, Xiaowei, Daqin, and Xiaoqin from birth until now. I pointed at each one. Combined with 11 years of my mother's wages that your family kept, that's more than enough. After you take this money, these children owe the Lu family nothing. Not 1 fun. All 4 children looked up, stunned. Their whole lives, they'd been told they were burdens, that they owed their grandparents an unpayable debt. Now someone was saying that debt was cleared? Grandma Lu sensed the trap, but couldn't resist the cash. She tried backtracking. I raised them with my own hands, that's worth more than money. But I cut her off. My mother should have been the one raising them. It was Grandma Lu who'd forced her back to work before she'd even recovered from childbirth, just to collect her wages. She took the money. She could not take it. I watched the Lu family walk away, Grandma Lu and Lu Xianqian without looking back, Lu Tsung glancing over his shoulder repeatedly with that unsettling look in his eyes. Then I turned to the 4 children and smiled. Welcome home, babies. From now on, this is your family. You have a mom and a big sister here, and we're the people in this world who love you most. I clapped my hands. To celebrate, we're having a feast for lunch. They looked at me with shy, uncertain smiles. Nobody had ever called them babies before. Nobody had ever called them treasures, or said they were loved, or thrown a party just because they existed. Dawei, Xiaowei,
Daqin,
Xiaoqin. For small people who'd spent their whole lives being told they were worthless, and one afternoon that changed everything. The village women worried I'd been foolish to hand over 500 yuan without written proof. But I wasn't concerned. We had a dozen witnesses, and if the Lu family tried coming back for more, I wouldn't be so polite next time. My mother knew them better, though. She warned they might claim the money was short. I just shrugged and flexed my hand. Everyone remembered what that hand had done to Lu Tsung yesterday. For lunch, I made beef hot pot, the first time any of the children or my mother had ever tried it. I had to keep filling everyone's bowls because they were too shy to serve themselves. By the end of the meal, all 4 kids were completely won over. Dawei and Xiaowei fought over who got to wash dishes, crying quietly while they scrubbed. My mother cried inside. I accepted their thanks calmly. These boys could still be saved. Better to invest in them now than let them turn into copies of their father. Meanwhile, the Lu family was already fighting over the money on the road home. Grandma Lu counted all 500 and found it correct. Then Lu Xianqian demanded most of it for his own remarriage to the factory widow. Lu Song grabbed the entire stack. He needed a bicycle and watch for his wedding, plus new clothes, cigarettes, and alcohol. There was nothing left for his father's plans. Lu Xianqian cursed Zhang Guilin for being ugly and said he was divorcing her no matter what. He accidentally compared her unfavorably to his own mother's looks, which earned him a death glare from Grandma Lu. Then they ran into Hua Zhao on the road. She played innocent, asking who they'd visited. When she heard it was my mother's family, she couldn't resist casually dropping information. Hua Zhao's husband gave her 2,000 yuan in bride price, plus a bicycle, sewing machine, watch, and radio, everything brand new. She walked off, leaving the Lius standing there with their eyes gleaming. Lu Xianqian was already doing the math. If Lu Song could somehow get his hands on ready-made wedding gifts instead of buying them, that 500 yuan would be freed up for other purposes, like his new wife. Life settled into a pleasant routine. Every morning I took all 4 kids mushroom picking, giving each of them a tenth of the earnings for their own school fees and pocket money. They were thrilled. No other children in the village got paid for helping out. In the afternoons, I taught them reading and math, pretending I'd learned everything from Grandpa the night before. Dawei and Xiaowei were humbled to discover that their barely literate older sister already knew more than they did after years of city schooling. One day the mailman arrived, but not with a letter from Yishen. This one was from Beijing, addressed to Grandpa. My heart sank a little. I'd been hoping for a reply about baby names, but I was curious. Grandpa's face went cold when he heard it was from Beijing. He let me open it. The letter was from Hua Zhao, Grandpa's son from his second marriage. The tone immediately rubbed me wrong. Instead of apologizing, he jumped straight to asking for forgiveness, framing his betrayal as something he'd been forced into for the greater good. He wanted Grandpa to come to Beijing and live with them. They'd heard he was sick and wanted to make things right. Grandpa asked me who signed the letter. When I said Hua Zhao, he laughed bitterly. Shouldn't it be Qi Zhao? He changed his surname to his mother's family years ago. Now he suddenly remembers he's a Hua. Then Grandpa told me the full story. After my real grandmother was killed by the enemy, he joined the army and left my father behind. At 30, he remarried his commanding officer's daughter, essentially becoming a son-in-law to the powerful Qi family. But he refused to be their puppet, which created tensions. When the political storms came, his in-laws turned his own children against him. They'd had his son and daughter publicly denounce him and cut ties, then tried to have him politically destroyed. If he hadn't had his own connections and gotten out quickly, he'd be dead or in a labor camp. His children had chosen the Qi family over their father. They'd changed their surname. They'd participated in trying to ruin him. And now, 10 years later, with the political winds shifting and the Qi family's position looking shaky, they suddenly wanted reconciliation. I understood completely. They weren't writing out of love. They were writing out of fear, scared of what was coming and hoping Grandpa's clean reputation might shield them. I tucked away the letter from Grandpa's estranged son without a second thought. We agreed to ignore it. I did carefully peel off the stamp, though. In a few years, old stamps would be worth serious money. I was already planning to buy stacks of the famous monkey stamps when they came out in 1980. The next day, a letter from Yishen finally arrived. He'd come up with baby names for boys, things like Guoqiang, Guoqing, Guodong. For girls, Yefang, Yehuan, Yeli. As someone from the future, I couldn't accept any of them. I'd pick the names myself and let him choose from my list. But the names weren't what made my blood run cold. At the end of the letter, he mentioned casually that he was being transferred to Tangshan. He didn't have a new mailing address yet and would be there about a month. After that, he'd finally get leave to come see me and the baby.
Tangshan.
I stared at the wall calendar. July 5th, 1976. 23 days until July 28th, the catastrophic 7.8 magnitude earthquake that would kill over 200,000 people. Yishen would be right in the middle of it. Then a memory from the original Hua Zhao's life hit me like ice water. After marriage, she'd received monthly payments from Yishen. For the first 3 months, his name was on the money orders. After that, the sender changed to Qin Xiangdong, his uncle. The original Hua Zhao couldn't read and never noticed. But I noticed now. Why did someone else start sending the money? The most logical explanation terrified me. I touched my belly. No more hesitating. I had to act. I told Grandpa I needed to go to Beijing, supposedly to meet Yishen's parents before his leave. I set the date for July 20th. I didn't dare tell Grandpa the real reason. If the earthquake happened and he knew I'd gone to Tangshan, it would kill him. Grandpa got excited, fussing about clothes and gifts for my in-laws. He knew Yishen's mother had been an entertainment soldier with high standards for appearance, so he told me to dress my best. That was actually reassuring. It meant I could wear something a little fashionable without raising eyebrows. For gifts, I went into the mountains and grew more wild ginseng and lingzhi mushrooms. These weren't hard to produce anymore. My powers now covered a 5-mile radius, and I could age a ginseng root to 20 years in minutes. I'd been giving Grandpa ginseng and lingzhi tea for weeks. He felt so much better that he suspected his terminal cancer might be gone entirely. The 4 children were settling in beautifully. I'd sent them out with homemade popcorn to share, and within 2 days they'd made more friends than they'd had in their entire city lives. The village kids thought they were fascinating for having lived in a real city. For once, they were admired instead of mocked. I'd also told all 4 children the truth about Grandma Zhang's lies and manipulation, permanently inoculating them against her future meddling. That old woman would find no allies in this household. I spent my remaining days before the trip deep in the mountains, pushing my abilities to their absolute limit. I found a hidden clearing and planted 200 ginseng seeds, then cycled them through their entire lifespans using the pendant's energy exchange. I watched flowers bloom and fade hundreds of times, counting each cycle. Most ginseng dies after a couple hundred years, but with my energy supporting them, the strongest survived past 500 cycles. I saved the seeds from the very last survivors and replanted them, repeating the process over and over. Each generation produced stronger plants. By the end, I had roots that lasted over 1,000 cycles and one extraordinary specimen that reached 3,000, a ginseng king. The effect on me was dramatic. The grime my body expelled became fine dust that smelled like flowers and medicine mixed together. My skin turned luminous, like polished jade. My features sharpened into something I genuinely call beautiful, the kind of face that would stop people in their tracks. Except it didn't. I'd gained something from the ginseng, its ability to hide. Wild ginseng is famous for running away from harvesters. It doesn't actually move. It dampens its own presence, so people overlook it. Now I could do the same thing. When I stayed silent, people walked right past me without noticing. Even Ma Auntie strolled by like I was invisible until I spoke up. But the most thrilling discovery was real, tangible power. I placed a vine seed in my palm and willed it to grow. It sprouted, lengthened, and hardened into a whip as tough as steel cable. I could control it with my thoughts, make it lash, wrap around objects, or drill through solid rock with a burst of energy. When I was done, I drained it back to dust. I practiced for days, developing new abilities and tools. Against a massive earthquake, one vine wouldn't be enough. I needed more. On July 20th, I finished my last session. I'd prepared a 50-year ginseng for Grandpa, 20-year roots as gifts for Yishen's grandfather and father, lingzhi for his mother, and a piece of the 3,000-year ginseng king's root, just in case Yishen needed saving. I packed a bag of the king's seeds and headed home. Time was running out. 8 days until the earthquake. On July 20th, I left for Tangshan with a handmade backpack, wearing a medical mask to avoid attention on the long train ride. Grandpa fussed over me endlessly, worried about my looks attracting trouble. I pretended to be deaf-mute when fellow passengers tried chatting me up. I arrived on the 21st and got straight to work. First, the surrounding villages. I rode a second-hand bicycle from village to village, using my powers to create landslides. I grew massive root systems underground, then drained their energy so the earth collapsed. I timed every slide for daytime, when houses were empty, no casualties, just uninhabitable homes. Within 3 days, every rural community around the city had evacuated to open ground. Then the city itself. I created sinkholes near apartment buildings by growing and dissolving plants underground. After a sinkhole appeared, I drained the adjacent building's foundation until it collapsed, always after residents had been evacuated. Building after building, the pattern became terrifying. Sinkhole appears, people leave, building falls. Nobody dared stay indoors anymore. Animals were going crazy too. Swarms of dragonflies and bats filled the sky, rats flooded the streets, dogs howled non-stop. People took these as omens and fled the city in waves. But many still remained. They lived in low buildings away from the sinkholes and thought they were safe. I was running out of energy. Cities have almost no natural plant life to draw from. So I planted ginseng seeds beside me, grew them to 5,000-year specimens, absorbed their energy, and channeled it underground. Over the previous days, I'd scattered seeds throughout the entire city's sewer system. Now I connected them all into a single living network beneath every street and building. By July 27th, I was exhausted. 7 days, without real sleep. At 3:42 a.m. on July 28th, I watched the hands on my watch align. 20-some minutes before the earthquake would hit, I sent a pulse through my underground network. The entire city shuddered, a small artificial tremor, just enough to wake everyone up and drive them outside. Then I collapsed. Every shred of energy was spent. The underground plants turned to ash. When the real earthquake struck 20 minutes later, I was wrapped in a cocoon of vines I'd barely managed to grow with my last reserves, just enough to protect me and my babies. The devastation was total. Every building flattened. But most people were already outside in open spaces alive. Hours later, military rescue teams swept the city from 4 directions. They met in the center, comparing notes. Casualties were far lower than anyone expected. Yi Shan was leading one of the teams. He ordered his troops to rest and eat before continuing rescue operations. Then a soldier called out, "Sir, there's someone here." In a pile of rubble, they found a dust-covered figure lying motionless on the ground. When the shaking stopped, my vine cocoon dissolved into dust. I was exhausted, covered in gray ash, lying in the rubble. Then I heard voices and opened my eyes. Yi Shun was reaching to check my pulse. Our eyes met. I couldn't believe it. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes was him, just like the very first time. His deep, magnetic voice asked if I was hurt. I almost answered, but the moment I spoke one syllable, his eyebrows twitched. He recognized my voice. I immediately faked a coughing fit and pretended I couldn't talk. I wasn't ready to reveal myself yet. He checked me over quickly, no blood, no broken limbs, told me to follow the road to an evacuation point and walked away. I grabbed his sleeve and whimpered, "Hungry." He pulled his arm free without a shred of sentimentality and said I could eat before leaving. Then he was gone. I actually liked that reaction. A man who melts at every pitiful woman would be trouble later. He passed the first test. His bunkmate Zhuang Yuanwu immediately crouched beside me, much friendlier. He asked about my family and situation. I told him I was a traveler stranded when the railway broke down, which was partly true. After sleeping a bit, I felt stronger and washed my face with rice water. When the ash came off, every man in the area went silent. Yi Shun glanced over, held his gaze for a few seconds, then deliberately looked away. When I beamed at him, he frowned and turned his back. I grinned. He was determined not to react to a pretty stranger.
Good man.
I gave a fake name, Zhao Hua, my real name reversed. His 3 bunkmates circled me like hawks. Zhao Yong tried asking if I had a boyfriend before Chen Feng elbowed him silent. Zhuang Yuanwu was trying to guess my age by sneaking glances at my figure. When lunch was served, plain rice, nothing else, the soldiers noticed something odd. The rice smelled incredible, far better than usual. Same rice, same water, no explanation. I just sat quietly by the cooking fire, hiding my smile. Nobody needed to know that everything cooked near me tasted magical. Zhao Yong scooped the first bowl and handed it straight to me. The other 2 glared at him from behind. The man they thought was simple had outmaneuvered them both. I couldn't accept the rice bowl Zhao Yong offered. My husband was standing right there. I pulled out my own dented enamel mug and squeezed it back into shape, which made the guys think I was poor. When I sat down to eat, Yishin chose a spot far from me. I immediately carried my food over and sat right next to him. Zhuang Yuanwu reminded me again that his big brother was married. I shrugged and offered everyone pickled cucumbers from my backpack, spicy sour ones I'd made before the trip. Yixin refused, saying he didn't like cucumbers. I had to suppress a laugh. His letters said the exact opposite. He'd written that he loved my pickled cucumbers and radishes. He was just being careful around a strange girl. When the others tasted them, Zhuang Yuanwu blurted out that they tasted almost exactly like the ones sister-in-law made. Close call. I offered Yixin one more time, and he wolfed down his entire bowl of rice, but still declined. Then he walked away without looking back. First test. Completely passed. He didn't flirt, didn't waver, didn't even make eye contact for too long. This was a faithful man. I followed his squad for the rest of the day, helping with rescue work. I needed to stay close. A 7.1 aftershock was coming around 6:45 p.m., and ordinary rescue operations were dangerous too, with buildings collapsing on rescuers. Yishan was annoyed by my constant staring and sent a soldier to tell me to leave. I argued my case. A girl alone in a destroyed city was unsafe, and the soldier agreed.
Yishan relented.
Later, he slowed down until I caught up to him. "Why do you keep watching me?" he asked quietly. "Because you're handsome." "Can I look?" He stared at me, then said coldly, "Are you single?" The tall man who sat across from us at lunch, Chen Feng, is a battalion commander, good-looking, from a good family, and single. I'm married. Looking at me is pointless. I stared back, biting my lip to keep from laughing and crying at the same time. "You'll regret this," I called after him as he walked away. He didn't turn around. Then the ground began to shake violently. I checked my watch, 6:30. That was too early. Then I noticed the second hand had stopped. The watch was broken. The aftershock was happening right now. I sprinted toward Yishen and saw the remains of a 2-story building toppling straight at him. The aftershock hit without warning. A 2.5-story concrete building toppled toward Yishen just as a crack split the ground beneath his feet. He fell. I didn't think. I just launched myself onto him. The building crashed down around us, and everything went black. I squeezed a handful of vine seeds and grew them instantly into a net that braced the concrete slabs pressing in from all sides. Within seconds, the shaking stopped. We were trapped in a small pocket between 2 angled slabs. I sent thin tendrils through the cracks to lock the concrete in place and punch an air hole to the surface. "Are you okay?" we both asked at the same time. I started checking him for injuries, running my hands everywhere. He grabbed my wrist to stop me, but I pinned both his hands together with one of mine and kept going. He couldn't break free, and I could feel the exact moment he recognized that impossible strength. "Who are you?" His voice came out tight, almost breathless, close to my ear in the darkness. The closeness, the dark, the position, it was just like that first night. I couldn't help myself. I leaned in and purred. "Big brother guess," he went rigid. That voice, the same sweet, teasing voice that had haunted him for months. "Xiaohua, I told you I got thinner and prettier, you didn't believe me." His heart was pounding so hard I could feel it through his chest. Then the word pregnant registered and he panicked. He broke free of my grip, pulled me into his arms, and frantically checked every inch of me for injuries. Very thoroughly, professionally even, including several areas that made the air go very quiet afterward. His hand froze on my belly. Then something moved under his palm, a rolling, bubbling sensation. "What was that?" he asked. I pressed his hand flat against my bare skin. The babies moved again. My eyes filled with tears. My babies were moving for the first time, and their father was here to feel it. I guided his hand and whispered, "Babies, this is your daddy. Say hello again." They obliged. He asked me why I'd come. I told him I'd wanted to visit his parents in Beijing, but really just wanted to see him. He scolded me for being reckless. I promised to stay home from now on. Then I teased him about trying to set me up with Chen Feng, and he growled, "Don't you dare." But I could hear the smile in his voice. We sat there in the rubble, his arms wrapped around me, and something extraordinary happened. We'd only met twice. We'd only had one real conversation, this one. But there was no awkwardness between us, no distance. It felt like we'd been together for years. Maybe the letters had done that. Maybe the night we shared had done that. Maybe it was the babies moving under his hand. This wasn't a stranger holding me in the dark. This was my husband.